All right. I'd like to call this June 27th, 2023 meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government order. As a first order of business, I'd like to turn to the Executive Director to declare a quorum.
Yes, Chair, a quorum is present here in Albany. Let me state that the meeting is being conducted pursuant to and in accordance with the provisions of the New York State Open Meetings Law, Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, the conference room here in Albany, as well as the room we're using in Manhattan at the New York State Conference Center, 25 Beaver Street, are both open to the public during public session. Public session is also being live streamed. And in addition, one of our commissioners, Commissioner Ayers, at certain points will be attending this meeting remotely pursuant to Public Officers Law 103-A and the Commission's corresponding rules for remote participation in extraordinary circumstances.
Thank you. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the public session of May 23rd, 2023. Let's get a motion to approve, and then we'll deal with any revisions that we have. Is there a motion to approve? Commissioner Cardozo, is there a second? Commissioner Carvalho. All right. I have one change I'd like to call your attention to, at least question about changing on page 9. Top of the page, the first full paragraph starts, Chair Davey requested that the commission plan, etc. I ask that section be reviewed both in the text of the meeting as well as the audio, and I think we have a change to make that.
Yes, we reviewed the recording of the meeting, and that portion should read, Chair Davey requested that the communication plan at tab E be amended on page 11 to state, quote, the communications director should respond to inquiries unless the communications director, executive director, or the chair decide a response from the executive director, chair, or other commissioners or staff is warranted, close quote.
Is that clear? It's just that the communications director will be the first point of contact on any of these inquiries, and then if it's warranted that some others of us respond, then we will do that. All right. Any other issues, questions, revisions to the minutes? All right, hearing none. Are we ready to vote, recognizing the change, acknowledging the change? All those in favor of approving the minutes with the revisions, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Now the operations report.
Yes, thank you. The operations report is under tab B in the agenda book. As we have been doing throughout this year, the report includes prior month's figures for comparison purposes, as well as the corresponding month and yearly period under the prior commission for this corresponding period of time. As has been the case for a number of months now, the reported figures are comparable and in some instances exceed the figures of the prior commission, and they reflect the fact that while we have not completed the expanded staffing plan, it's well underway. We've filled a number of vacancies in the commission, and so the numbers are improving. You'll see, for example, in investigations, we're now at about the same level that the prior commission was, and I expect those numbers to grow as we move forward. Closings still have not caught up with old figures, so we have an accumulation, but as staff comes into place, we expect that we'll see those improve as well. Any questions, Commissioner?
On page 6, under audit and review, I see there's a stark contrast between year-to-date by Colleague and year-to-date the year before by Jacob, and I wonder if there's an explanation for that.
Yeah, one of the explanations, and there are several, The primary one is while the commission was in formation, that is from the period when ECRA went into effect, July 8th, 2022, until the commission was seated, we were not conducting compulsory audits at that time in order to raise no questions about the authority of staff prior to the delegation being made. We have been shorthanded for a period of time. We're now catching up. And in fact, that figure is going to markedly expand in the coming months. We're doing a large draw going forward, so that will improve.
Thank you.
In fact, picking up on the introduction of the newest staff person in the communications unit, we also have, as we address the backlog with respect to audit and review, in attendance this morning is our newest employee in that audit and review unit, Brendan Fanning. So I just thought I'd want to introduce him to the commission.
Welcome, Brendan. Commissioner Whittingham.
Okay, great, thanks. Two questions. On page 7, I note that the record request outstanding, there's no number there for either April or May, but then we go and we see year to date, and we have a footnote that's saying 79%, so it's outstanding. So is there records outstanding?
There are pending requests. I'll defer to Emily on that. There are pending requests, but everything is being handled on a timely basis.
Right, so I added that because the commissioners have been asking, like, how many records requests do we have outstanding? Are we late on anything? So this is a new row for this month that I've added that we'll have going forward that has the number that are outstanding, just meaning that we have to fill, right? But they're on time. They've all been acknowledged. They all have a date by which they will get responses by, or an explanation of why we weren't able to respond in a new date. But we're all caught up. We, as of today, actually, they're down to only 14 outstanding, so, and none are overdue.
Okay, so that 14 would go here in the future, because there's no number there at this time.
So in the, so as of records outstanding, it says 19 as of June 13th, 2023. So that's when we put the operations report together. So that's where it says year-to-date colleagues, so that's as of June 13th, there were 19.
Okay, so individually, you're just doing it collectively, and so we have nothing April or May. This is just like.
So it's the as-of date, right? So
Okay.
it's like year-to-date cumulatively where we are. And like I said, it's a new row, so I didn't have numbers for them, but I can certainly populate them, going forward as we go forward.
And I think we'll label it to avoid confusion as pending requests.
Yeah, we can say that pending.
Which
Okay.
maybe will be more communicative.
A second question related to that, if a request comes in and you're searching for the record, if it's not there in a physical file or electronically, do you go beyond that, or are you saying to the requester, we don't have it? So, for example, you get a request, you have physical files, you've reviewed, there's nothing there, you go to the computer, there's nothing there. Or if there's a recording in a meeting or something of that sort, are you going there, or where does your search begin and ends?
Our search as include looking in files, looking in data systems. It includes inquiries to relevant staff who might have responsive materials. If need be, we'll conduct a background electronic search of emails, depending on the nature of the request. So there are whole variety of searches, in effect, that are conducted in order to comply with the requirement of FOIL that the search be diligent.
Okay.
The one thing we're not required by FOIL to do is to create records. So if records don't exist, there's not an obligation to create a record. But if there's data that would support the request, we'll provide access or provide the data as appropriate. subject to relevant exclusions, privileges, and so on, and exemptions that exist in FOIL.
So you will make a request of staff. Do you make requests of the commissioners as well, or that goes beyond what's required?
We have made requests of commissioners where appropriate.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Carvalho, did you have a question?
I do.
Okay. I have one on page 5 of 7. Under the number of officers and employees overdue for ethics training in 2022 year-to-date, same period, we were at 2,000, and it's blank for this year.
Do we have Michael Sand, Director of Ethics?
Yeah, I didn't quite hear the question, though.
So, Michael, on page 5 of this tab B, 5 of 7, under training, and sort of fourth column row down, rather, number of officers, employees overdue for ethics training in 2022 for the same period, year-to-date, it was a little over 2,000, and this year, same period, we're showing a blank. So I'm just curious as to what's going on there.
Michael, I can respond to that. I don't mean to interrupt, but this is Megan, Deputy Director of Education. So last year, we still had tracking on all the functions in the FDS system, and and it gave who had not taken it yet, so we had numbers. Now we don't have that right now until we get a system built. So that's why it's blank. Agencies are keeping their own records. Does that make sense?
And will we at some point, when our system is in place, we'll have those numbers and report them out? Is that the idea?
That's the idea eventually, yes.
Yeah, let me say, later in the meeting, there will be a presentation by Marlena and Megan going over the training protocol that we'll be putting in place. Right now, we don't have strict training deadlines because we're proposing to put the first deadline the end of this year for the first level of training for state employers. Remember, we've gone from training only FDS filers to training the entire executive workforce. So we've gone from 30,000 some odd individuals requiring training every 3 years to over 300,000 who require training in some form, whether live or online, every year. So as we implement that and we get folks into the first part of the training cycle, we'll start to create deadlines for their training.
So just to push this for my own clarity and not to belabor it, so is this 2,000 number from 2022 only related to FDS filers?
That's
and
right.
if we were doing the same thing,
Yes.
yeah, and if we're doing the same thing, let's say a year from now, we will be talking about 300,000 state employees, and we'll have a number that shows how many of those employees are actually behind or overdue in their training. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we should just take note that we could see a number that's 50,000
Right.
of 300,000, just hypothetically, as opposed to 2,000 of 30,000 that we're doing now.
We'll hope not, but yes.
Is that, are we?
Yes.
I mean, just hope not, but hypothetically.
Right.
That I'm just trying to balance, trying to set expectations.
Yeah, and I don't want to get ahead of,
Right, sure.
of the meeting agenda and the presentation, and I don't want to take away anybody's thunder. But it's going to take a period of time,
Understood.
years,
Understood.
to phase in the full
Yeah,
training
no, this
complement
is
and
not
cycle.
this is not a criticism in any way of anything. It's just trying to make sure that we have, that I have, and hopefully it's a benefit to my colleagues, a appropriate perspective of what these numbers might look like a year from now.
Right.
Because we're talking about a bigger pool of people. Okay. Anything else in this section? All right. Are we ready to move on?
Well,
to-
the next item I had was staffing and recruiting update. And we're moving along well. Not as expeditiously as any of us would have liked, but we're moving along well. Training unit has replaced the one position that had been vacant, and they're in the process of recruiting 2 additional trainers, at least 2 additional trainers. A number of interviews have been conducted. Some individuals are coming back for second interviews. They are also recruiting for 2 training assistants. We may elevate one of those training assistant positions to training associate, which is an actual trainer, and that's providing training not only for employees and state officers, but also training of trainers in the various agencies. In the ethics group, recruiting is underway now for a new deputy director, a vacant position, as well as 2 additional ethics attorneys under the expanded staffing plan. And we're also recruiting to replace a filing specialist in that group. In investigations and enforcement, we're recruiting for 2 enforcement counsel. We're actively interviewing. We've got a couple of individuals coming back for second interviews, and also recruiting for 2 additional investigators. A number of candidates for that. And in administration, Mariana, acting director of administration, is recruiting 2 additional admins for her group, who will sit here in Albany.
Questions, comments? Staffing update? New York? All right.
Budget update.
Budget update?
That's under attachment C. Again, we are, for now, running below budget on the personal services side. That is partly attributable to the fact that we're still in recruiting mode. So in spreading the personal services dollars across the entire year, we're running below level. We will catch up once we finish our recruiting. As I've said previously, we anticipate that we will need additional funding next year to cover personal services.
Questions on the budget?
Can you speak to the contractual services that you're expecting for the first quarter?
The contractual services, that includes, I think Mariana's on.
I think we have it, but it's more than double every other, maybe tripling, almost tripling the second quarter, more than doubling third and fourth. What are our expectations for the first quarter?
The expectations for the first quarter?
The contractual services.
Yeah, we're expecting to run in accordance with the budget. There are items that fluctuate for various services. You have the detail. I don't know if Mariana?
Yes, I'm here.
We have Mariana on?
Hi, can you hear me?
There's a blip. Yeah, can hear you. In May, under contractual services.
So, yeah, so to just clarify on, so first quarter, there's always little slow start in April because for this year, the budget wasn't approved till the beginning of May. So we don't have available funds for 23-24 to pay out most of our contractual services, which the bulk of it is our leases. So for May, you have April and May and June rent being paid out, which is why it looks like it's doubled on that end.
Did you say it was a rent?
Yes. Other questions? All right. Should we go commissioners per diems? I don't think we have anything there for this month.
There were none for this
So we'll
month.
report out next month on those. I just actually signed off on a whole set, so they'll be reported out next month.
We will have next month.
All right. Compliance report?
Is this part of your report that came up to us?
Yes, that's the detail for the budget.
Yeah.
Yes, under tab D is our third quarterly training compliance report. That's required by ECRA. Every quarter we're required to report on training conducted by by our agency and the agencies that are providing training to state officers and employees, reporting as well on lobbying training. The Legislative Ethics Commission reports separately on their training of legislators and legislative employees. Our third quarterly report, which was for the first quarter of this calendar year, went to the governor and the legislative leaders in June. Two elements of good news. One, in terms of reporting of statistics, 98% of the 380 some odd agencies are now reporting statistics. That doesn't mean they're all reporting that they're conducting lots of trainings, but they are giving us statistics, both on the sizes of their respective workforces and the number of trainings they've conducted. The other element
Here's
what I found.
the other element of good news is that for this quarter, the total is actually equivalent or exceeds the total for the first 2 quarters of the year. So we're actually growing, training is growing at a very decent rate. So we now have, in that quarter, 25,433 state employees and officers trained, which means we've got almost 51,000 in total trained since inception of EFRA. So we're not, as the chair has pointed out, we're not at 300,000 by any means. But you'll see our goal is to get there by the end of the year, one way or the other. And that will be a mix of live and online training. The figures we're seeing here are, for the most part, entirely live trainings or live online trainings being conducted, primarily at agencies. Some of the trainings are being done directly by our staff. In addition, the lobbyist and lobbying client ethics training figures, which for the first time are now reflecting the training of clients, is a robust figure, over almost 6,700 trained. There's a ways to go, but we're getting there. And for clients, that's a brand new training requirement. As for most of the state workforce, ethics training is new, for all the FDS filers. So we're making good progress. We have a lot more to do to get to where we need to be.
Commissioner Edwards and then Commissioner Blake.
Yeah, a couple of things. Thank you for the report. This quarter report that you submit to the legislative and executive bodies, do you only report on the education training, or is it an overall report?
The statute calls for ethics training reporting.
On a quarterly basis?
Well, on a quarterly basis, and then there's an annual report. We have been reporting aggregate statistics quarterly. For the annual report, which will be after the current quarter is completed, we'll report at the agency level.
So is this should this be sent to the Education Committee before you send out your reports to the legislature for discussion?
We could absolutely do that. This is a statistical report at this point, so we've just been compiling the statistics.
But it would be helpful if the committee had this report, gave feedback on this report prior to your sending it up.
Sure.
And then present to the to the commission. That would be helpful.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. We'll do that going forward.
Yeah. And we may want to think about that as a protocol for other reports that are going to be made public, whether or not there needs to be a committee vetting prior to those reports being public.
Right. And on your agenda, you said you do a annual report, but it's not. Is it restricted to training, or it's overall?
The annual report I'm talking about here, the one required in ECRA, in the training section, sub 8, in section 94, is only an ethics training component. It does involve both ethics workforce training and lobbying client training. The LAC files a separate report for ethics training on the legislative side. We do have an annual report requirement and that's going to be going through the Communications Committee,
Okay, so.
as was discussed at the
Okay.
last commission meeting.
All right, so I was a little confused early on around annual report. I was thinking of a typical annual report that the board would put out, talking about what we do, but it sounds to me that this is a requirement. The annual report will have some sort of specifications with regard to what we are required to provide the legislature and the executive body. Does it include that, would that annual report include our reporting on, for example, what we're doing to advance public health, what we're doing? Would it include, for example, what we're doing to increase public awareness around what we're doing?
So I think, yeah, the question is, will the annual report talk about our public education efforts? Is that the question?
For example, what are we doing to better engage the public?
That will be part not of this statistical report, which is required by subsection A of 94. The annual report will.
I understand that.
Will.
So that will include that.
Communications and outreach and
that'll go
training.
before communications.
That will go through, well, that will go through the communications, and communications, as I understand it, will be parceling out various portions or assignments to the respective committees for their input into the annual report.
Okay. Do you do any forecasting? In other words, we talk about I know we are trying to phase in the increased number of constituents we need to address. And this report doesn't give me a sense of what your goal is and what you actually accomplished. So my question is, when you do your quarterlies, can you include some data that helps us understand what you were reaching for versus what you actually reach?
Our goal is to have the ability ultimately to provide those kinds of predictions, how many trainings will be conducted by which agencies during given periods of time, in order to meet that target of 150,000 roughly live online trainings per year, and a corresponding number of pure online trainings each year. So we're going to have that plan. We don't have the computer system yet to import all of the data that we need. We're in the process of building that. And we don't have enough input yet from the agencies to be able to map out, because agencies work in cycles just as we do. So we don't know, it's too early to say whether training will be flat in every agency across the year, each of them doing a quarter of their workforces every quarter, or a 12th every month, or if they're going to do it in bolus, target.
So you're saying
certain training sessions. So in terms of quarterly projections, we don't have enough information.
When will you have that information?
I'm hoping we'll have that information over the next couple of years as we lay in the plan. We'll have to do provisional things, which is what we're doing now.
I think you got to find a way to project. I mean, I don't like the idea of working in the dark to saying, well, we're not quite sure what we're going to expect folks from other agencies to do. We should have some expectations and some way of checking those expectations. And I don't think we should wait a couple of years for that.
And that's what we're working toward. But in terms of having a meaningful system in place at 384 agencies to provide a training flow, when we were dealing with 30 some odd thousand, it was very, very different.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But then say, well, our goal is to reach out to 50 agencies a year versus, in an effort to reach the 300,000 mark you want to get. I don't want to restrict what you want to measure, but tell me what you're measuring. I think that it would be helpful for the legislature to understand where we are, understanding where we need to go, and how we're getting, and the progress we're making for getting there.
Yeah, and we're going to have
whether or not, and if the goal is we're trying to get each agency on board because they're running by their own timeline. Okay, I'll accept that. But then say that then I should have some forecast with regard to how many agencies we have, how many of them needs to get online, and what's our goal to achieve that, or to help them achieve that. But to have nothing there with regard to some benchmark for which we can measure doesn't give me a sense of the progress we're making and where we need to put resources to improve our performance if need be.
Understood.
Yeah, and you'll, in just a few minutes, I think, you'll see the presentation, which you're familiar with.
I'm not
which
talking about
will
presentation.
show-
I'm just comfortable. It should be in the report. That's what I'm saying. I'm comfortable with your
I understand.
presentations.
Right.
But if we're reporting to the legislature, that's why I asked, is there some specifications that we are obligated to respond to? But I think that if no, we have to just make sure it's training and education. There's got to be a way to measure what we've done. Not holding, listen, if you don't meet the goals, you don't meet the goals. But we need to understand that.
I think that's pretty clear. So you're proposing that we have a plan and an approach with some targeted benchmarks
And
and then
include in your-
report in on what those benchmarks, whether or not we've met.
And
them.
include it in your, and
And
include it in
in the
reports.
quarterly reports to
Right.
the public.
All right, in just a few minutes, you'll see what the plan is in terms of,
Being
the
able to do that.
benchmarks. That's another level, but you're absolutely right. We need to establish
Thank you.
targets, benchmarks.
Okay.
Commissioner Whittingham.
Just have a clarifying question on page 3, at the top of the second sentence. First sentence, you talk about, the state agencies developing and implementing interim measures. Then the second sentence, you include development of business rules. Could you expand on what those business rules you're referencing?
Those are the business rules that have to be incorporated. And I'm going to get beyond my area of expertise very quickly in this sentence. But those are basically the principles that are going to be built into the system so that we can put in the targets and the metrics that are necessary and the triggers, annual trainings. If somebody takes live training this year, next year they're scheduled, for example, within a year to take online training. And it gets much more sophisticated than that. And when Marlena and Megan do their presentation in a few minutes, they'll get into more detail on those.
It falls under
components.
pretty much the specification. It's not something really separate and apart. It falls under the
Yeah.
specification then. That's fine.
Yeah, of the system, yeah.
Anything else on the quarterly training compliance report?
We seem to have lost.
We lost New York. Okay, well, hold on. All right. I'll resist the temptation to make a comment about the need for New York State technical services or to maybe think about some upgrades here or there.
It's it says something about what's state of the art
Well,
means. It's a very sophisticated system.
New York has lost their internet and they're trying to get back on.
Can they just get on the laptop?
Yeah.
Just,
It's not, it's the VPN, it's not the.
Can they,
no, but have them get on, if they get on the laptop and WebEx in, they can be present on the
I think
laptop.
they lost all of their internet, but we can.
It's gonna take a few minutes, right?
Yeah. Can they call in?
The executive director.
Who is in New York?
Sorry?
Who is in New York of the commission?
No, it's not only staff, but we expect Commissioner James to be there shortly.
Can you hear me, York?
Now we can.
So New York-
Okay, you're back.
All right, now, let's just take a 2-minute break while we wait for Commissioner Edwards to come back, because she asked me if this was going to take a minute, and I said yes, and so.
It's a good bet.
So let's just take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Let's not shut anything down,
We'll just be-
just mute.
Everyone mute.
No one go anywhere, or if you are, come back in 2 minutes.
Should I dare ask? That's Dr. Twisting. That's right. Yeah. Albany, can you hear us?
We can.
Yes, we can.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me get under text.
All right, so commissioners are all back, and I think I owe the New York State ITS people an apology. It seems as if our New York office is under a completely separate contracting group of technical overseers. I won't comment any further.
I know,
Yeah, we'll just leave it alone.
that's a problem too, but okay.
Yeah. All right, all righty. I think we're up to our public hearing recommendations under attachment E.
Yes, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Keith St. John, our general counsel. Let me just say that with respect to the training recommendations, the Education Committee has addressed those in some detail, and we'll have a more detailed presentation expect at the next commission meeting on that component.
So what I've tried to do is prepare for you, and again, this is for discussion purposes only. Ultimately, the decisions and choices that you make are yours. What I'm trying to do is offer you my suggestion on, with respect to the myriad recommendations that we heard at our first annual public hearing at the end of March. What I've done is identify each of those recommendations, sort of particularize what we heard, and then with the benefit of some sense that I had as to what each committee might delve into with respect to the subject matters that were raised at the public hearing, what I've tried to do is identify by subject matter, i.e. committee, where the various individual recommendations might best go for purposes of committee consideration. So that's what I tried to do throughout these perhaps unwieldy, but several pages of recommendations, again, that we heard at the public hearing. You'll see that with respect to several items or recommendations, there may be more than one referral. In other words, my thinking is, in the first instance, a committee may have primary jurisdiction, so to speak, and I'll admit, the disclaimer here is that I've sort of put on one of my former hats as a legislative counsel to the Senate majority. And so it's with that sort of perspective that I looked at each item, each recommendation, and tried to estimate where it might best be considered, both as a primary matter and then with respect to certain items that may be of interest to more than one committee. I've identified the numerous committees, 2 or 3 even, that might want to weigh in on how these recommendations get considered. There is a logic to the ordering of that referral process, so that again, I'm sort of anticipating committees with primary jurisdiction, committees with secondary jurisdiction, and tertiary jurisdiction, so that if several committees might want to weigh in or have some input into the deliberation and consideration and advancement of these items, these recommendations, I've tried to suggest a roadmap so that in the first instance, a recommendation might go to a particular committee, and then be referred to a committee of secondary reference, and then perhaps even a committee of third or tertiary reference. Part of my thinking as well is that ultimately, with respect to items that may call for a change or creation of regulation, or for recommendations that may call for an amendment to state law, in other words, a statutory proposal. My thinking is that the legal committee would be where those items get considered, and the legal committee would be for purposes of a recommendation that might have various committees that it would flow through. The legal committee would be the last committee for a recommendation that might have other committees wanting to weigh in.
Let me just make a recommendation up front and see how it sits, and then you can say you don't want it, and then we'll go on to something else. But it seems to me we could spend hours on this, and we should, but not today. So I'm going to propose that we think about the first 2 weeks of August, finding a day where we have a public discussion of nothing but our legislative priorities that are included here and any others that we have. So I would ask that we hold in abeyance then any discussion of whether or not we want to pursue any specific recommendation as it has to do with legislative changes in the law. So that would be one thing. And then the other thing I would ask that we do, so that we don't get too bogged down here, is that we focus in on whether or not we think something has been allocated to the right committee, and not talk about the substance of it, because that could get us bogged down as well. So let's stay on process, and then we'll find a time to deal with these things more substantively, if we can agree to that. Commissioner Cardozo.
Well, I agree. I mean, to really have a fulsome discussion of all of these items would take hours. And we don't want to have two different committees at loggerheads with one another. In addition, to the extent that we need to go to the legislature, we have sort of some built-in deadlines if we want to make a proposal to the legislature for next year. So I think Fred's suggestion is a good one. But the additional point is, do we want somehow, at some point, to involve some of the people who gave us these input, the Reinvent Albany and the various other good government groups, most of whom we already had that preliminary meeting with a number of months ago. And those groups, with a couple of exceptions, talk about a lot of these issues. They're not just in one area. And it would seem to me that at some point, we might want to say, let's have a cross-section of the commission meet with all of those committees, Reinvent Albany and all those other groups.
Commissioner Cardozo, hold on one second. Is the public still getting this?
Can you hear us, New York? New York,
Yeah,
can you hear us?
I see the live stream.
Okay, so live stream's still working. Okay, go ahead.
And when you think of the timetable and the difficulty we already have of our committees finding time to meet and the open meetings law problems, this is overwhelming. And we've got to prioritize this. And if, we heard these recommendations at the end of March. It's now 3 months later and nothing has happened, with the exception of what we're already dealing with here.
And education.
Yeah, I say with a couple of exceptions. So I think we've got to roll up our sleeves and figure out how we're going to tackle these issues. And if it's legislative, we've got to get moving quickly. And I think the additional question is, do we want to make a formal legislative presentation towards the end of the year, not just on the open meetings law, which I think we'd already agreed to, but on a number of these other issues, and recommend, in effect, putting in our own legislative proposals. But this is a mammoth job that, couldn't come at a worse time in terms of vacations at all, but we've got to come to grips with this.
I agree. Commissioner Edwards and then Commissioner Whittingham and Commissioner Carvalho, did you have your hand up? Okay.
A couple of things for me. First of all, August is not good. You promised we'd have a month off. And I've already made plans.
Well, early
said-
August?
You said we were going to have the month off.
Well, early August?
How about early September?
Time's a
I'm
wasting.
just
Anyway,
saying,
we'll
okay.
talk about it. Okay.
Maybe I'm a little off, but I thought we were assigned, each committee were assigned the questions at the last meeting. Didn't we go through, I know I walked away with 5 questions for the Education Committee.
Right.
Okay,
But
so we were assigned.
Right.
So my suggestion is, that each committee begin looking at those questions and approaching them and coming back to the board with our progress. I don't think that I agree with the legislative piece, but when we look at the questions to which we've been assigned, we should be able to point out which ones, the staff should be able to help us point out which ones will need amendments to the law. Maybe those would be a priority for us if we want to include it in the total legislative agenda. So that's
And do
fine.
you think that those questions, and I'm not recalling them, also cover the issues that were raised at the public hearing?
Yes, yes. And we've identified some that would need legislative change. And we've asked the staff to come back with pros and cons as to why we should or should not do it. So I think that's at least that's how we approached it. And we're not limiting
We being the
Education Committee. And we're not limiting ourselves with the time frame. We don't always expect what we're putting forth to happen this year, maybe even next year. We'd rather be thoughtful and do it correctly and phase it in, as opposed to being so reactive. So
I agree with that.
yeah. So I
But
don't
we do
think
have
it's
some priorities, right?
yeah.
Right.
So
okay.
we just meet, look at the questions. If we find that the question that we have may require us to collaborate with another committee, then we should include them in our meetings to address it that way. But I just think passing it out to multiple committees makes us work more in silos, which we're trying to get away from. And I just think that one committee should be assigned to a question, and if we find that there's overlaps, we need to pull other people in to be part of that conversation. But that's my thought. Otherwise, it's committees we can't meet in the existing committees we have, let alone increasing the amount of committees.
Narrow
we
down
have to
what's
meet.
needed, present it to the whole commission.
Let me offer,
Let's hear Commissioner Whittingham and then we'll.
Thank you. Happy for a public meeting in August. If we can accommodate Commissioner Edwards. I agree. I'm with you. We got to August up. My question, Mr. St. John, I wasn't quite clear from looking at this, which committee had it primary and which had it secondary. What you explained makes sense, but looking at this, I can't tell. I saw a lot of things refer to, and I was looking through it and I said, yes, some of these are at different places, but as to which one is primary, I'm not absolutely sure. There is a whole lot going to legal. And so I believe that we may need subsections in legal to highlight it. And if we have those ahead of the public meeting, so we can be better prepared, and so we can have a productive meeting. I mean, it might be a whole day meeting, that's fine, but to be prepared and productive, then I think we probably want some subsections, and so that we can get, prepared.
Or if I may, some prioritization.
Right.
Absolutely.
The number of.
Yeah, prioritize it, but with legal having so many, I think it's necessary for us to put subcategories.
No doubt.
Because it's just a long list.
Mhm.
And we want to have the public meeting, we want to interact with others, but we have to be prepared. So when we're coming there, we're not looking at it and you explaining it to us, but we haven't done our preparation.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to offer to have staff, along the lines of Commissioner Edwards' suggestion, provide pros and cons for each and a little bit of commentary to help inform that decision-making. We can distill much of this, not all of it, into a kind of spreadsheet that could be sorted in different ways with primary, secondary, and subcategories. That might be useful in figuring out the best and most efficient way to parcel out the various proposals.
I think it might lead to less debate if we did only primary committees, and then if another committee decided that they wanted a piece of it, then we could do that, but
It gets too complicated.
yeah, it does get too complicated with all these great minds around this table and the discussions I've seen previously. I can only imagine where we end up, but
And what was the sense of the?
Just so I'm clear, what I did not want to do is give short shrift to any of the recommendations that we heard at the public hearing. So that's why the listing is rather, to some extent, overwhelming. It's because I identify each and every recommendation that was offered, and then I'll leave it up to you as to how you want to receive it.
Commissioner Cardozo.
Are we saying that some subgroup, maybe the three people at the head of the table, say, okay, Administrative Committee, we would like a report from you, tentative report from you on subjects A, B, and C, and Education Committee, tentative reports on B, C, D, and E, and we want those reports in some form, I'm not sure what, by a date certain, so that we can then evolve. What do we then do next? Do we need to draft a regulation? Do we need to draft a request to the legislature, what have you? But we've got to come to grips.
That's a good approach.
So, for example, with the lobbying committee, with this list here, what I've been fortunate enough that Director Quinn has already presented a nice brief for me that I haven't shared with the committee or the whole commission, but we plan on doing that. And then we have a flavor for what's needed, what action is needed, if any. And if there's a debate, that's fine too, if somebody thinks that, but at least the director can, who's in a better place, can respond to that. And then the plan was, at that point, we'll decide whether it's necessary for a committee meeting. And if so, after the committee meeting, we'll present to everyone what we think an action plan is.
So let me try this.
Is that fair?
We get rid of the secondary and tertiary assignments. We focus only on the primaries.
Can I just interrupt you there, Chair? I'm sorry. We've already sort of decided that, like in other words, that there's not going to be a problem doing it the way you have proposed, because I think we've decided that whenever we do anything as a committee, we're going to
invite everybody.
We're going to invite everybody. We're going to we're going to share information, and so it's great to know how this crosses over with other committees, but everybody's going to have an opportunity to be heard if they choose.
Sure. I think it helps, I agree, and I think it helps with the focus if we know which committees specifically are dealing with which issues. I think Commissioner Cardozo's proposal, consistent with what you said, Commissioner Carney, that we have these committees take these priorities and come back to us with a set of action steps for each one.
Right.
Now, since I can't get Commissioner Edwards in town in August, maybe we find a day right after Labor Day where we spend the day going through those, right? So that because we can't, it just seems to me we can't do it during a regular commission meeting. It requires attention unto itself.
I would just add, though, that if we do this in September, it's got to be that the relevant committee has done its homework beforehand and comes up with a written document that will say, we propose X, Y, and Z. And maybe it says, and the request the staff to draft a regulation, or get further input. But we've got to be, by September, we've got to be ready to say, well, what action are we going to take to implement whatever it may be?
So let's entertain a motion. Go ahead.
First of all, I'll go along with the end of August if you have to,
At the end of August?
if that's going to work for the committee.
Then you just, yeah, no, everybody's gone the end of August. We made our plans around the 1st of August.
In addition, everyone had, the committees have to meet before that.
Yeah, no,
That's
absolutely.
the point.
Absolutely.
That's this
absolutely.
month. See, and I also think we should be, I just think we should not have a goal to achieve, to reach all the questions.
No, the goal is prioritizing. The
Oh,
goal is
just
prioritizing and a plan of action for what's prioritized.
Got it, okay.
Right?
And you've already moved in that
We've done
direction
that,
already.
yes.
Yeah.
And
And
we
you
have too.
But you just
we
have
have
to
to.
meet to talk about
Yeah,
it. Right.
we were just waiting to see how we were going
Right, and
to.
you
Sure.
have.
And education has.
And then we have to.
Right, right. All right, so we'll find a time before the September meeting where we'll dedicate a day to hearing from committees what their priorities are and what their plan of action is for pursuing those priorities. And then maybe to a lesser extent, we'll know what the remaining issues are for each committee, and then at least a beginning understanding of how those remaining issues will be addressed. But right now, it's going to be priorities in September and a plan of action for them, and we'll find a date. I think this should be reflected in a motion on the minutes, so that we have memorialized how we're going to do this. So, you want to make the motion, Commissioner Cardozo?
I move that we have a meeting no later than early September, special meeting no later than early September, at which each committee will present what it has identified as the priorities that committee wants to focus on, with a preliminary proposal from each of the committees of what specific action should be taken with respect to those proposals.
To those priorities.
Priorities.
Yeah. Is there a second? Commissioner Carvalho. Questions?
No.
Discussion, yeah. A quick question. I thought at our last committee meeting that we were identifying those priorities, and the motion is now saying identifying the priorities again. Can we be clear as to what exactly we're going to be doing there? Because at our committee meeting, we had a whole meeting with priorities and a list of priorities.
Right.
Are we now changing that? Specifically, what will we be doing? Or are we saying that based on those priorities, we want an action plan?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think
That's the
that's
point.
That's what
probably
we're
what we
saying.
need to do
Right.
versus, again, identifying.
Well, some committees,
So,
I think
Haven't really-
Commissioner Carney said it.
Some committees haven't
have
met.
already done it.
Right.
We
some-
haven't met. I'm
Yeah.
on that committee, so we haven't met.
Well, that's what that's exactly what he's saying. He has had conversations with staff. They have a proposal they've not yet submitted to the committee or the commission. That has to happen between now and September.
Yeah, and the only reason we haven't, we were waiting to see what the procedure was to handle this.
Right.
And that's fine. What I am saying is, the motion is asking for priorities again, which we had a whole day meeting.
Substance behind the priorities.
So we want a report and an action plan.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
That's what we want.
So that's what we should move for.
Right, except some committees haven't established priorities.
Some committees have not.
In
Not.
other words, just what you
Oh.
think needs
Right.
to be done.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Any more
So
discussion?
at the last meeting, I thought that we all had some, but they were.
They've not met to agree to them.
It's
They've not
different.
met to say whether or not they want those to remain their priorities.
I think, so we're looking at priorities, committee priorities, and the priorities for the public hearing questions. Is that it?
The key point is, we can't just have a lot of words. We have to be in a position to say, we therefore suggest, while we're focusing, say, on the open meetings law, which I've been thinking about, we want to change the open meetings law, and we are going to propose, we're going to say in September meeting, we're going to do that by A, drafting a proposed amendment, B, submitting a report to the commission at the September meeting with an outline of exactly what we think that should do and why we need that amendment. And C, but no later than whatever date we put a little bit later, submit to the legislature a proposed statutory amendment.
That's my understanding.
Then that's right.
And it makes sense to me.
Right. And so that's what we want to do, but we don't want to come in September saying, well, we'll start drafting the amendment, we'll start drafting the report.
Let me say this. What I try to do as the chair of lobbying is I turn to the people that know, such as Director Quinn, and then we speak about it, and she puts together what, some priorities, some things that need to be done, and then what we'll do is we'll present it to the committee and everyone else, and then we'll discuss it, and then I guess the end product would be, to your point, where are we going to go with it? And I think that's the best way, because the work gets done by the folks that know it best.
Agreed.
So my question to that is working with the director and the chair, presenting it to the committee, or having a discussion with the committee as well, and then presenting it to the commission as a whole?
Both. So in other words, it would be presented to the committee, and we're going to distribute it to everyone. Then we're going to discuss it, to see where everybody stands, and then we'll have a final product. Or recommendation.
And that's fine. I just want to make sure that in that discussion, the committee, the lobbying committee is a part of that discussion and not a presentation to the lobbying committee and then a presentation here. So the lobbying committee, in my opinion, should be a part of that discussion before it's presented to the larger commission.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're on the same page.
No, and Emily and I have been doing that, and perhaps not in quite the same kind of detail with respect to the Communications Committee.
Right.
And Commissioner Edwards has had a similar interaction as well.
Right. But I just think, I agree with you, it needs to be clear.
Sure.
Because I still struggle with my perception of the role of the committee and staff's perception are very different. And it may not be, but I just think that, the committee drives the material. And when we come before the commission, it really is staff report supporting our report out to our colleagues. Everything goes through the committee.
Right. Well, we have a motion on the floor that seeks to clarify this.
Yeah.
Is there any more discussion on the motion?
Can it be repeated? I don't know if Mr. St. John has it written. If not, that's fine.
I'll make that attempt. I'm not a stenographer, so don't hold me to this. But
Okay.
Commissioner Cardozo moves that there be a meeting no later than early September at which each committee shall present what each has identified as the substantive priorities that it wants to focus on, with a proposal on what specific action should be taken by a date certain.
To implement those priorities. That's the motion. Any other discussion? You ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. I want to acknowledge that Commissioner James is in New York. All right. So the motion passes unanimously.
Can I?
So let's go Commissioner Carvalho and then Commissioner Cardozo.
No, I just want to suggest that what this means is that each committee, with all the vacation problems, must find time before September, obviously, to get together with itself to be able to then, by September, give its report.
Right. Or at least before that September meeting.
I just wanted to have a reminder of what's the time frame to get the proposal. When do we need to have the proposals together for legislative amendments, like with respect to the open meetings?
Well, on the legislative proposal, we already have a built-in date of the final report must be given to the Open Meetings Law Committee by January 1st, as I understand it, which means it's got to be adopted by the commission no later than our December meeting. And therefore, we have our deadline sort of
This is in November.
Right, because in my view, we have to discuss this more. This means drafting a report, drafting the legislation,
Yeah.
so that the committee can then make its presentation to the commission solidly
Right.
on all those points.
Probably October.
All right?
Huh?
We should do it October.
October, yeah, we need to do it, yeah. Too close.
I just have to
All right, well,
put in a comma in one of the drafts, that's all.
All right, so we,
It's on his game.
so I think we've got some direction there, and hopefully it's clear. We've certainly memorialized it in the minutes, so we can always go back and refer to it if we,
Hanging in the background of all this, it seems to me, though, is for some of these issues, so we want to pursue them, we do want to meet with the proponents.
sure.
For example, the
Absolutely.
person who made election law changes. I'm not sure how we're going to, I think we have to leave it up to each committee
Right.
how to handle that.
Right. And again, these will be open meetings, public meetings. But yes, we can invite those people who made the proposals at the public hearing and anyone else who'd like to speak to them, to the committee meetings. Commissioner Carballo? No? Commissioner Whittingham? No?
No, that's fine. I agree. I think those individuals who made the comment, along with the general public, that I have no further, once it's open to them, that's fine.
All right. And we've said publicly, we're going to have a legislative agenda by the end of the year. And so let's have a legislative agenda by the end of the year. All right. Any committee updates? Okay, I think we've talked pretty well about that. All right, so.
For the Education Committee, our Deputy Director of Education, Megan Hennigan, and our Deputy Director of Learning Innovation Administration, Marlena Diaz, have a presentation that has been, is the product of their work with the Education Committee. And it's the proposal for implementing the ethics training requirement, executive workforce wide going forward in accordance with Executive Law Section 94.8. So I think this is a good time for the presentation.
Do we have time for that?
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
Marlena?
Marlena and Megan?
Hi, good morning. Can everyone see our screen?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome. I'm sure you all recognize us. Hi, I'm Marlena Diaz, and with me is my colleague Megan Hennigan, and we'll be taking you through the
Turn the volume
presentation.
up a little bit.
Are you able to hear me a little clearer now?
Yeah, we're turning our volume up. So please go ahead.
Okay. Well, as I stated before, with me today is my colleague Megan Hennigan, the Deputy Director here of Education, and myself, Marlena Diaz, Deputy Director of Learning Innovation. So your leadership team is comprised of our Director of Ethics, Michael Sands. You have both myself and Megan as your deputy directors. We have one training associate position as well as one training assistant position. So this right here is the current structure of the training unit, and it should be obvious to everyone that our current staffing plan is clearly lacking vital resources. And at present, that training associate position remains vacant, and Megan has been handling all of our ethics trainings as of right now. Now, our proposed staffing plan greatly gives us more resources. So as you can see, it still maintains us as the two deputy directors here, but instead of only having one training associate, in contrast, this proposed staffing plan allows us for 3 training associates as well as 2 training assistant positions.
Now, to give you an update on our hiring processes, we did extend an offer for one training associate that we're really excited to bring on board. We're currently in the final phases of the hiring process for an additional training associate. And throughout this interim period of time, both me and Megan have been meeting regularly and developing a training plan so that once these two training associates are on board with the commission, we already have a plan in place to be able to kind of help expedite their ability to start training immediately, because, you know, we need to be able to increase our training numbers as quickly as possible. And we really cannot ask our partner agencies to double and triple their training sessions while we don't do the same here. So, you know, the most important priority for us right now is really staffing up. Now let's begin with a high-level comparison between the Public Integrity Reform Act of 2011 that we refer to by as PIRA, and the Ethics Commission Reform Act of 2022. Now, PIRA mandated ethics training for the first time for FDS filers. Now, these are the folks that make above a certain salary grade, or they are in certain policy-making positions with their agency. In addition to that, PIRA also mandated ethics training for lobbyists, which included both your principal lobbyist and your individual or in-house lobbyist. Now, in response to PIRA, at the time, JCOPE established a Train the Trainer program, which simply was that we actually went out and trained ethics officers from the 385 plus agencies, so we would give them the ability to be able to train their own folks in-house, in addition to also our own training that we were offering at the time when we were JCOPE. Now, in contrast, the Ethics Reform Act of 2022 greatly expanded the ethics training requirement from not just that 30,000 population of FDS filers, but to over 300,000 state employees. In addition to that, it also expanded the ethics training requirement to both lobbyists and clients, which is approximately over 11,000 individuals. So as you can see, you know, it's a huge mandate. We went overnight from 30,000 folks to over 300,000.
Now I'm just going to go really quick over what we had to do. So JCOPE under PIRA, the FDS filers had to first take the online ethics orientation. That was an SLMS within the first 90 days. Or then and they could test out of that if they took the CETC, which was a live course. It was mandated in law to be a 2-hour course, and it was required to be comprehensive and be given within 2 years. So there was the potential of folks getting this online ethics orientation, which was a much shortened training, and then not getting a full comprehensive training until 2 years after they started. Next, every 3 years after, they had to take the ethics seminar, which was also a live course, in person, mandated to be an hour and a half. And then finally, PIRA, as Marlena had mentioned before, required an ethics for lobbyists course, which was an SLMS. There were a ton of problems in that. We eventually moved it to our website, actually. So now, here we are under ECRA, and things have changed again. So the CETC has to be live in every other year. For the entire state workforce, we talked about it was 30,000. Now we're at least up to 315,000 people completed every 2 years. It did eliminate the 2-hour course length requirement, and I've been doing it in about an hour, and we're going to look to try to even make it even more condensed if we can. Then an ethics refresher. So in those intervening years, we're going to have an online course. It's still in development right now, but that is going to be an online course that's going to be taken in the years in between the live. ECRA also put into the law the ethics officer training, which we basically we're already doing these ethics forms. So it just codifies what we've already been doing. And then the ethics training for lobbyists and clients, as Marlena had mentioned, expanded it to clients, and that was launched in January of this year and has been going swimmingly, as I have been told, I believe. Right. So let's talk about a few minutes about our current training-related staff. right now, Marlena does a million things in this agency, so education is not her only job, but amongst me and Brianna Neal, my training assistant, and the three of us, we have at least 600 to 700 emails coming in about various education inquiries monthly. It could be more than that. That was just a guess. We had mentioned in our training report from before, we've done about 25,000. The agencies have trained 25,000 employees from January to March, and it looks to be probably it's going to be at least that or more. I'm starting to get the stats now from agencies for the next quarter. And that's from about 385 agencies. One of the issues we are noticing and want to be able to address, again, hopefully when we get our staff in and have more bodies and are able to do more outreach, is we notice that there are a number of agencies who, although they're giving us stats, so we're thankful that agencies are reporting to us that those monthly stats, 108 of them reported nothing trained. And some of these are pretty big agencies. And as you can see, it's gotten a little bit better as the months have gone on, but we really want to be able to start to reach out to those agencies who are reporting zero and help them figure out why are they not doing any trainings and try to give them assistance to figure out how they're going to ramp up their training.
Now I'm going to get into some of our technology-related training goals. So really the goals for us right now, both short-term and long-term, is to be able to automate, streamline, innovate, and increase our partnerships. Now, in terms of innovation, we need to really streamline some of our antiquated processes so we can spend more time on the initiatives that matter. So as an example, as Megan had just stated, on average, they're receiving anywhere from 600 to 700 inquiries a month in the training unit. In addition to that, the monthly operation reports and our monthly training stats swallow up a lot of our training assistants' time, as well as Megan's time, because all that's being done manually. So every month, we're receiving anywhere from 400 emails from these different agencies, providing us with our monthly stats, and then we have to be able to transpose those onto our spreadsheet and do kind of a little bit of calculations that way. Now, in contrast, we've been working with our ITS partners to develop an automated system where instead of having to take all of this information down manually, we would be just doing it automatically through one of our applications. So we're way past the beginning stages of being able to develop this, but we'll be giving the ethics officers and any of their training officer designees access to a system that would be able to record, track, and monitor these monthly statistics. And the goal of that being is that in the interim, we would be able to do it on the monthly and quarterly level, but long term, we would be using this on the employee level, meaning that phase one will be capturing these monthly aggregate stats, but long-term goal is we'll be developing this so that the employee roster, meaning all 300,000 plus employees, their names and their information will be able to live into this system so that not only can we do aggregate stats, we'll be able to do it on the employee level as well. Now, with regards to increased partnerships, we've really accelerated in this particular area. Megan has been working with partner agencies and getting what we like to call these data sharing agreements that I'll talk a little bit about more later. In addition to that, we've been meeting, I'd say, 2 to 3 times a month with a lot of our partner agencies and, being able to understand and isolate what some of their concerns are so that while we are developing this technology, we're taking the feedback from our partner agencies into consideration. Now, as I mentioned, we've been working on these data sharing agreements. And Megan really has been spearheading this. So one of the most important data sharing agreements that we were able to finalize due to Megan's efforts was the data sharing agreement with OSC, the Office of the State Comptroller, which primarily has the majority of the employee roster information. Now, a limitation here is that approximately 57 out of the 385 agencies, so we're talking approximately 15% of those folks, are outside of the OSC payroll. which means that we have to get into data sharing agreements one by one with these specific partner agencies. Megan's already been in talks with actually several larger ones, including the MTA. Now, also a challenge for us is standardization of data points. Because we have agencies that are using different payroll systems, they have their own internal systems, we had to come up with what we believe is the standardization of data points, which means amongst 385 different agencies and potentially 385 different systems and ways of tracking employee data, what do we believe internally here at COLIG would be standard data for all of those folks? And this is what we've come up with. So in terms of our data sharing agreements, the data that we're looking for from these partner agencies would be an agency code and identifying number, the agency name, obviously, an employee identification number. That way, if these employees are moving from agency to agency, their training records would theoretically be able to follow along with them, employee name, employee email addresses, and status codes, because we only really want to focus on those employees who are active state employees. We want to make sure that our database is as current as possible and eliminating those folks who may have left state service for numerous reasons. Also, another data limitation is we have to be able to segment the state workforce into live training for 150,000 folks every year instead of focusing all of those efforts on 300,000 every other year. So we are currently in a business rule development. We actually just recently was assigned a new project manager. We have a much larger ITS team than we did in the last previous weeks, and me and Megan will be entering into a grueling business rule development schedule. We actually have, I'd say, around 4 to 5 meetings, at least 2 hours apiece, where our only goal will be to be developing what we call these business rule requirements. So application requirements, simply what do we want this new system to be able to do, to track, to monitor? So we want to be able to manage and refresh the employee roster database, which means we want to be able to keep track of all 300,000 plus employees. And in addition to that, we also need to be able to refresh that data, which means as new hires come on board, we need our system to be able to isolate those folks in addition to be able to giving them a 90-day due date. And we also need to be able to do that with existing employees as well. The new system will be able to generate notifications for training reminders, overdue notices, enrollment information and certificates, as well as be able to provide training waivers and extensions if needed, and the ability to track and enter training completion data, as well as reporting functions for both monthly stats, quarterly stats, overdue stats, and those type of metrics. Now, some of the application challenges that we've been dealing with thus far is, and we actually will be meeting with one of our partner agencies that deal with the statewide learning management system, and being able to import historical training data. So for those agencies that are able to utilize SLMS, some of them currently right now are tracking their live in-person and live remote CETC trainings using SLMS, and we want to be able to seamlessly grab that information from SLMS and import that into our system. So that's hopefully a goal that we'd be able to accomplish. Avoiding double data entry efforts. So this is something that we've heard a lot through our monthly meetings with our agency ethics officers, that we want to make sure that the system is easy for them to be able to utilize, especially for those folks who are already using remote technology, as in Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, and other platforms. Again, I briefly talked about segmenting the state workforce. We need to be able to assign global due dates to existing employees. Unfortunately, Executive Law 94 only provided us with due dates when it came to new hires. So new hires have 90 days to be able to take that live CETC. However, it didn't provide any guidance with respect to existing or seasoned employees. And also an application challenge is agency buy-in. You know, we have a lot of agencies who already have their own systems in place. And, you know, we need to be realistic to understand that maybe some agencies may not want to use our application.
All right, so the next thing that we're going to chat about is our next plan is to launch what we're calling an on-demand CETC. we know right now, since the agency was established almost a year ago, that quite a few agencies are ramping up their efforts, but a lot of employees have not had live training yet. So we want to get them something as soon as possible. And what we're planning on doing, and Marlene is working on it right now to get it together, is to launch a SCORM compliant online CETC that folks can take right away. SCORM compliant means simply that an online training package can be uploaded into any learning management system that an agency might have. This leads to our next lovely slide here, which is what we are going to propose the training schedule be for the state workforce, basically for the next 2 years. So this is what we think makes sense, and hopefully you all will too. So for brand new employees, as is required in the law, the hope is that they're going to get that live CETC within the 90 days. I mean, that is what it says, but if it doesn't happen, what we're going to suggest is that at the very least, new employees are completing this on-demand CETC, which will be hopefully done soon, by within the 90 days, actually, yeah. So if they can't get into a live one within that first 90 days, then they have to take this on-demand CETC. Then the live CETC, they would need to take by the end of next year, and then the refresher, which will definitely be done by then, would have to be done by that next year, the end of 2025. So that's the first segment, new employees coming on. Existing FDS filers who have completed a live CETC in 22 or in 23. So these are filers, we know we have a very good compliance rate. I believe the lowest it got when at JCOPE was only 6% had been late, which is a decent number out of 30,000. So the on-demand CETC will satisfy our refresher requirement for FDS filers until we have the one that's in development ready. So if they took a live CETC in 2022, we're asking that this refresher, this on-demand CETC, be taken by the end of this year. And if a filer took it in 23 sometime this year, then again, we want them to get into a live CETC by the end of next year, 2024. Now, finally, here's the group, the biggest group. Existing FDS filers, and so that's a small number. Some, I think we talked about this at a committee meeting recently. There are some FDS filers, I think it's a pretty small group, maybe 100. I can pull that number for you if you all want it later. There's a small group who's never just taken training. And then non-FDS employees who have not received ethics training. So we're talking about the bulk of the state workforce. People who are not filers, who've never had it, but who were employees before our transition from JCOPE to COLIG. We want these folks to take the on-demand CETC no later than the end of this year. Again, if you can get into a live, that's better. But at the very least, we want them to be able to get into the on-demand and take that by the end of this year. Then the live, again, would be 2024, at the end of 2024, and the refresher in 2025. All right. So increased COLIG training opportunities. These are some of the things we want to be able to do. Marlene and I have talked about doing agency-specific CET trainings. For example, running space up at the plaza at lunchtime, do a training session, so they can get OGS employees to come in, or agency-specific, so that the administrative side of that would be perhaps done by the ethics officer instead of us. Also, we want to be able to increase the number of ethics officer forums, which we already have. We're doing small groups, but we're going to hopefully plan some other ones where we invite all the ethics officers in.
And to points that were earlier made, I mean, once we have our own, are those 2 new training associates on board, these are some of the areas that we've already been discussing some of our goals. Like we would like to be able to, once we have these folks trained and they're able to get out on the field and start doing more of these remote trainings, be able to say, this specific trainer, this is what we imagine your goal to be, for the quarter. We expect you to be able to do X number of open sessions. We need you to be able to do X number of agency-specific CETC trainings. Unfortunately, we won't be able to kind of develop those metrics until we have these folks again in-house. This is me. Okay. And then again, we are reaching out, Marlene and I and Brianna are reaching out to ethics officers all the time. I mean, half of our emails and phone calls are from ethics officers to talk about training issues. And so again, we'll push this idea of agency-specific CET trainings. And I mentioned before, we want to be able to start doing specific outreach to agencies with those low training numbers. And also perhaps do forums specifically on getting more input on the tracking system, what their needs are going to be, and also through increased written guidance and communication. Yes, our plan is once the training schedule that Megan has just gone through has been officially approved, and that would be one of our major written guidance that we want to be able to send out to all of our ethics officers and give them the awareness of what that expectation is with regards to that new training plan. Now, recently, we just had an ethics forum that was specific to those agencies that have specific needs with regards to seasonal employees. So one of our major live training challenges revolves around those agencies that do have seasonal employees. And some of those challenges include employees without smartphone technology or access to computers. They may not have email addresses. We have a specific agency right now that is in the process of trying to gather 40,000 email addresses, for their state employees. Right now, the only method of communication they have for those folks is, through the U.S. Postal Service. Some of these locations have no access to Wi-Fi, such as our state parks. And then you have employees on non-traditional working hours, specifically your state health facilities, correction parks, and authorities. We have been given specific requests to modify live training requirements. Folks have asked us, and these are issues that will all need to be approved, for pre-recorded training sessions with live moderators. And we've also been asked recently for alternate course delivery and certification options, including CD and USB drives with, paper attestations, video and print CETC versions. They've asked us to actually translate some of our training into other languages such as Spanish, and also be able to provide ethics officers with PDF training attestations. Questions?
So first of all, let me say that, first of all, thank you. I think it's good for the commission and the public to see how involved this process is. It gives me some assurance, I hope it does other commissioners, to see that you know what the issues are and that you have a plan for addressing them. It is a monumental task, no doubt. I think that the state legislature and the executive branches of government should take notice as to what an extensive operation this is, and the types of resources it requires, particularly on the technology side. And I would encourage the legislature and the executive branches of government to commit themselves to the investment of those resources if we're all serious about implementing these specific requirements of ECRA. Again, thank you for the comprehensiveness of this presentation, for laying out all the issues, getting very granular about what those are. But again, I think if we don't have the stakeholders on board, like the legislature, like the executive branch, to put the resources behind this, then it presents a big challenge for implementing an ethics program as envisioned in ECRA. So I'm encouraging everybody to step up to the plate on this. One final comment, and that is that I think it's important for the public to know that the other substantive work that this commission has to do is getting done. Investigations are going forward, routine advisory opinions are being offered, and other major legal matters that we are facing that are very much in the public are all being dealt with and being dealt with expertly. So we're building a ship as we are sailing it. And I want to thank everybody from the commissioners to staff for their commitment to it. And again, I want to call on the legislature and executive branch to make sure that we have the resources we need to do our work. Commissioner Cardozo.
I want to say first, I thought that was an extraordinarily impressive presentation. One thing you didn't mention is at the same time, are you evaluating the actual training programs, the substance of it? I remember I took a look at one of the training programs, I guess, for lobbying clients, and I had some concerns with it. Told it's one of the many things that you have to still dealing with. Is that on the agenda to be sure that the actual substance that is being taught in these courses is correct and doesn't need any change?
Commissioner, I will say that when we develop these courses, it goes through many layers of review. But if you notice something that's not correct, you let us know. But I mean, we've looked at it a million times to make sure everything's in there. And we do have a responsibility to make it comprehensive. So I'm hoping we're not missing anything.
I have one suggestion, but I can do that offline when we have some time.
Yeah, let me just add, there have been, as Marlene and Megan pointed out, requests from agencies to make certain adaptations, to truncate some of the presentations because of whether their workforces are seasonal or have limited responsibilities. Those are all under consideration at this time, and we'll be bringing to the Education Committee staff's assessment of those proposals, but so far there have been no departures permitted. All the agencies are required to work with the training materials that the agency provides. There is an alternative version of the comprehensive training that is being prepared because we now have non-FDS filers who don't need to talk about the FDS filing aspect of things, which was part of the traditional 2-hour CETC. So that's been taken out for some.
Michelle.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to your question. When we worked on our proposed charter and set goals for the Education Committee, one of the goals that we wanted staff to build a case for is a program designed for training that can be measured against other programs across the country. And so we're working on this term, best in the field, or best in the class. But we ask the same question. It's great you're running training. We want you to look externally as opposed to just internally with regard to perfection. And we're expecting them to come up with a strategy to demonstrate that our program, when held up to public scrutiny, can be measured among those exemplar programs in the country. Now, they're supposed to come back to us with a way to do that. But my observation, it sounds wonderful, but we seem to be we look internally a lot, and we measure by internal indicators, which is fine. But we need to look externally as well to make sure we're consistent with what's taking place in the country.
Thank you.
That's our goal.
Commissioner Carvalho.
I thought that was an excellent presentation too. Thank you very much. But I just have a question. You're developing a new program, or is that what you're saying? A new computer program that works with other agencies, and they would enter the information, and then we would have access to it.
Correct. So right now we're actually in tandem, which is two massive projects that we're working on at the same time is we're developing two separate things, right? So we're developing that on-demand CETC, and actually before today's commission meeting, actually me and Megan were able to kind of sit down and go through the initial redesign, right? We actually met with a lot of our ethics officers, and we wanted to know what the core of the curriculum for them, what are the important takeaways for them, and basically streamline that on-demand CETC to be able to meet those needs, right? So that would be an online, self-directed, self-paced, online click here type of training. Now, in addition to that, we are in the process of developing that application, right? So the application will actually have two phases. The first phase that we want to be able to launch is allowing ethics officers the ability to report to us aggregate monthly statistics as to how many state employees they're training within a given month, right? So we want to be able to have two different metrics there. Number one, identifying the total number of employees per agency, because unless they're on the OSC payroll, we really don't know that information. Unfortunately, the state as a whole doesn't provide us with that information. There's not one entity that can give us an entire roster of 300,000 plus employees. So unfortunately, one of our major tasks here for me and Megan is to kind of identify the first 60% and then individually gather all of those other metrics together into that one application, right? So phase one would be able to have ethics officers enter in their monthly stats and identifying the total number of employees per agency, right? And then phase two would be in order to be able to have them track these individuals on the employee level.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the amount of time and work you all put into this. Even more so, really appreciate the amount of time and work you're going to put into it, because it's clear that we're just getting started. So thank you, and I hope you can get staffed up relatively quickly so that you have the resources and the capacity and bandwidth you need to accomplish this fairly monumental task that this legislation has presented us.
Marlene, could you put up the proposed training schedule again? Do you still have the slides up? I would like.
Give me 1 second. There you are.
This is the plan for implementing and complying with Executive Law Section 94 sub 8 training requirement, both the comprehensive live and the refresher training workforce wide, and having that in place by the end, fully in place by the end of 2025. We would like the Commission's approval to act on that and to inform ethics that's going to be the plan going forward, and that we expect compliance with it, and we'll do everything we can to work with them to implement that plan.
Sure. Is there a motion? Commissioner Carvalho? Did I see you shaking your
No, I
head?
was just agreeing.
Okay. Do you want to make the motion?
No, thank you.
No?
I'm just wondering whether or not, I see the dates, but do you have numbers there? I see the time frame, but I don't see numbers with regard to.
Goals in
Yeah.
terms of how many people we want to have trained by what period, over what periods of time.
So I suggest that goes to the Education Committee to evaluate, to come back with recommendations for benchmarks they want to achieve over those 3 years.
Can we, are you okay with this high-level approach? And then we'll get benchmarks as to milestones along the way in terms of the number of people are trained until we reach the 300,000.
I mean, the goal is by the end of 2025
Right.
to have the entire work.
But I think the point Commissioner Edwards keeps making is that we need milestones, we need goals.
Understood.
Yeah, so I think that should not, though, preclude us from approving this overall plan. And the Education Committee will work with the staff to set benchmarks.
We can set intermediate goals,
Yes.
but the overall goal is
to get to 300,000 by the end of 2025.
Correct.
Okay.
300,000 annually.
300,000 annually.
And tell me why it needs to be done this month? Is there a
They need to be
deadline?
able
If I may
communicate with the
interject.
ethics officers. Sure.
Hi, I'm sorry, if I may interject. So it's imperative that we be able to approve the plan for several reasons. Number one, ethics officers and their training partners have been waiting for us to be able to cement some type of deadlines and timetables with respect to training. As I mentioned before, executive law only provides this guidance with new hires, and we need to be able to address the larger population of state employees, and those are our seasoned employees. In addition to that, with respect to application development, it's critical for me to be able to come to our ITS team and be able to give them cemented deadlines. We cannot build a system with vague deadlines. I need to be able to, once we have the employee rosters in place, I need to be able to first identify who those new hires are so I can provide them with a 90-day due date as an example. And for all of the seasoned employees who have received training, all of their compliance, whether they've taken training on time or they're overdue, will all be related to this training table. I understand the need for goals and benchmarks, and I agree that that's important. But for the first phase of this operation, it's imperative, it's critical for us to be able to have cemented due dates and timelines. Otherwise, my application development is stalled.
Okay, I am cognizant of the time frame. And the only thing that's softening me a bit is that we're not meeting in August and we couldn't come back to this committee until September. But I caution you about agreeing to long-term goals without some sense of what that roadmap looks like to get there. So again, what you're saying is we got to do 300,000, we got to move from 30,000 to 300,000 over
2.5 years.
Over how many?
2.5.
Over 2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And we have a gazillion agencies who are in different stages of development where we can't get a handle on what they can do and when they can do it, but yet we want to sign off on a long-term plan with no sense of how that's going to get done. That bothers me.
Well, I don't know that I completely agree with that.
Okay.
Okay. I think that I think the missing piece that we've talked about is the numbers. So how many people are going to be trained when over this period of time? We know we want to get to 300,000 a year by 2025. But we don't know what those numbers are going to look like between now and then. So will we have done 100,000 by the end of this year? We'll have done 150,000 by the middle of next year, or 200,000 by the end of 2024. Those are the milestones I think we need to articulate. But I do think they have a really good roadmap here for getting to point A to point B. We just need some milestones along the way in terms of numbers. So I would encourage us to approve this overall approach, and then for the education committee to work with Megan and get to those specific milestones.
You have a question?
Yes, Commissioner James.
Yes, I'd like to hear as to why we're planning to the training for the 300,000 employees by the end of 2025 instead of the end of 2000.
He said, so people, yeah, your question is, why are we committing to, why is the 300,000 being committed to for end of 25 and not the end of 24? Is that right?
Yes, because that would be the 2-year period.
Well, we need to be able to accommodate,
Marlena, the executive director was going to answer, and then we'll go to you.
My apologies.
We think it's too ambitious to impose that kind of obligation and that kind of ramping up on the agencies. We want to afford them additional time to seek additional budgetary allocations if they need that, or alternative ways of training their workforces. We want to build our capability of assisting them with trainings over that period of time. we simply think this obligation, which is a shared obligation for us and across 384 other agencies, is one that they need time to ramp up their capabilities. If we thought we could have that kind of compliance by the end of '24, and if we could achieve that, that would be great. But we think allowing the entire, essentially the executive branch of state government, to build this capability between now and 2025 is not completely unreasonable. We put it that way. It's a heavy lift. It's unquestionably a heavy lift to go from training really 10,000, roughly 10,000 people a year, to training over 300,000 a year. That's a big deal. We're hoping there will be some synergies. We may be able to make use of SLMS, the statewide training learning management system, although that maybe hits 60 to 80% of the workforce. We've got to fill in the blanks, and we need a lot of cooperation from agencies. If we could do it by 2024, we'll certainly do that. But we think it's going to take a couple of budget cycles to get everyone there. And to get us there.
Sure.
We're going to need more resources. There's no doubt we're going to need more resources to support our end of this.
Thus my appeal at the end of this session. Commissioner James, anything else on this?
I just feel anything like, I agree that we ought to approve this high-level plan, but I do agree with Mr. Edwards that we ought to see, this is the July meeting, some numbers that the training unit visions for accomplishing this goal over the 2.5-year period.
And just to make sure, did everybody get that? So Commissioner James, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that you do believe that we should approve this, but you also agree with Commissioner Edwards that we should have some milestones along the way in terms of the number of people that will be trained or projected to be trained, and that we should perhaps even have that at the July meeting.
Yes, thank you very much. That is exactly what I was saying. Probably not as clearly as you do.
Okay. I'm sorry. Technology is creating challenges for us.
You presented that in a concise way.
Did he say? I'll take that. All right.
And staff will endeavor to create milestones.
Great. Commissioner Carney has made a motion to accept this proposed training schedule. Is there a second to the motion? Commissioner Cardozo has seconded. And I will acknowledge that Commissioner Ayers has now joined us. Commissioner Ayers, if you speak, you'll come up on the screen.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. And I'm going to try to leave my camera off as much as I can because I'm recovering from facial surgery, and you all don't need to examine my forehead, but I've been advised that it's okay for me to have it on during the votes and off at other times. But I am here, and it's good to see you.
Great, it's good to see you, and glad to see that you've recuperated well from your surgery, or are recuperating from your surgery.
Thank you.
Sure. So we have a motion, we have a second. I think we've talked about this a lot. So are we ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Any abstentions? So the motion carries unanimously.
Right, thank you.
Sure. Let's see, where are we?
Can I also,
yes.
Can I just propose? So is it like a quarter of agencies are not reporting any training at all? Is that what you're saying? Like,
I'm seeing, I'm not going to name any names in this meeting, but there are some agencies who are consistently reporting 0. And so,
training at all.
Right.
And you're saying those are pretty large agencies.
Some of them. So again, it's hard. I'm excited to get, Marlene and I are excited to get more people in so we can start to
address those
sorts of issues.
Oh, I'm just curious.
Reach out.
That's the point I'm making.
Figure out how we can assist them getting stuff going.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just point out that when moving forward, if there are proposed resolutions coming out of committee, that that we not put resolutions on the floor unless they go through the committee. No resolution should go to this floor without
Unless the
committee
committee has
support.
reviewed it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I would reiterate that point, and it relates to the next subject on the agenda.
All right, then let's move to
I
that
agree.
subject. Freedom of Information Law.
Yes, under tab F, proposed FOIL regulations.
We got a good body break. This is going to be long.
Yeah.
We'll,
I suspect so.
let's,
Yeah.
you want a break?
Yes.
All right, okay, so let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Down the live stream. Yeah, everybody should mute. Michael, you want to mute that?
Real quick.
Great. New York, you ready? Great. And the live stream is up and running? Excellent. All right, so we're on item number 5 of our public session agenda, and it has to do with FOIL regulations.
The proposed FOIL regulations are under tab F. They had originally been proposed in March. At the last meeting, we extended the emergency adoption that had taken place in March. I think, is Megan here? I think the latest extension of their applicability runs into August. So we would need to act on them at the July meeting. But in deference to the Communications Committee, if there's going to be an opportunity to have them taken up, and
We have a meeting in July.
at the July meeting, and there is a comment that was received just prior to the expiration of the deadline for comment from a number of organizations jointly, dated June 9th.
So
Why don't we just defer consideration until the July meeting, so there's an opportunity for the Communications Committee to address both the proposal and the comments that have been received.
I would appreciate that on behalf of the Communications Committee, but I also suggest what Claudia said. I think as a general matter, if a proposal is going to be made ultimately to the commission, that it should first be run by the relevant committee. And this was not the case here. And I noticed that the other outside groups that commented on the proposed FOIL regulations obviously had received the draft proposal. So I don't think it would have been very difficult to send it to the Communications Committee. In fact, I think it should be sent before we send it to third parties. That's a bigger issue. But I think that efficiency would suggest we do that going forward.
Yeah, I should say that this, of course, was part of the several prior agendas from the time it was first proposed, and it was available publicly, but I understand your point. So we'll table it until the July meeting.
And no objections to tabling? All
The
right.
whole section, okay.
All right. Number 6.
Number 6 are the proposed further amended Part 941 regulations. These were first proposed well prior to the formation of the committees. The proposal has been publicly propagated. We did receive one comment months ago from essentially the same group of entities. Their only request was an expanded definition of victim. We have revised that twice now. So the proposal is ripe for permanent adoption at this time. Essentially, what we have done is to conform the Commission's existing Part 941 regulations carried over from JCO to conform them to the requirements of ECRA. So it's not just the change in the name of the Commission, but also changes in some of the procedures. Notably, the fact that a Commission vote is no longer required to elevate a preliminary review into an investigation. The Commission can vote to do that, or staff can do that. Post-investigation, staff makes a presentation to the Commission with a recommendation whether to close, advance to hearing, settle the matter, issue guidance of some kind, and then the Commission votes on what the next steps will be, including to return it to staff for further investigation at that time. And that's reflected in these changes. Again, we have a definition of victim as revised in response to the recommendations from a number of good government groups. We have provisions for notice of allegations, notice of hearing, notice of closure, and notice of continued investigation or guidance. as provided in the statute. It also clarifies the provisions relating to the conduct of hearings and the authority of hearing officers and the attorneys for the parties with respect to the issuance of subpoenas when matters go to hearing. And that's further clarification.
Commissioner Edwards.
When you say that staff is no longer required, that there's no longer a need for a vote to advance a complaint, either the staff can do it or the commission can do it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
After a preliminary review by staff, a complaint comes in, a tip comes in, something is observed in the media, in a number of ways, a review is initiated. Staff makes an initial determination of whether there's specific and credible evidence of a potential violation of a law that we enforce by an individual who's subject to our jurisdiction, to the agency's jurisdiction, and then staff decides whether to take it to the next step of pursuing a formal investigation, which means the issuance of a so-called 15-day letter.
Yes.
We inform the subject of what the potential violations are and give them an opportunity to provide whatever information they think we should have in making the further assessment.
But you're saying that the commissioners can also do the same. But my question
Yes.
is, how do we get the information? Because we don't see the input, the intake.
Absolutely you do, because we staff are providing commissioners on a weekly basis
I see.
with investigations as they come in, and then we report again at each commission meeting, so we accumulate that. We also, if we're communicating before elevating a matter to a formal investigation, if we want to communicate with the agency, or an agency that referred it, for example, the Office of the Inspector General, or the Attorney General's office, or an agency inspector general. If we want to communicate, we're also informing commissioners on a weekly basis of those steps.
So when we get information material from you, you indicate whether or not you're going to elevate it, and we can say we object, we want it elevated. Is that how?
I think we could, yeah, I think in theory we could do that. If the staff decides that they think something should not be elevated to an investigation,
Right.
we have the right to overrule that
But the question, how do we do that?
at a meeting.
At a
In a
meeting.
formal motion.
Yeah, and I should say, before we close the matter that involves factual determinations, we're seeking the commission's vote on closing it, whether or not the statute specifically
understand.
requires. So you would be aware that we don't think we're going to.
Here's a tricky part, and a little bit of the elephant in the room for me,
Yeah.
is what if the staff says something should go forward to be investigated? We certainly have the right to overrule that. I would hope that that will never happen on my watch.
I don't.
Unless
I
it's
think,
something really egregious.
again, there's no legislative history. There's no legislative history, and so I don't want to speak for the legislature or the governor in fashioning the statute, but I think there was an intention to give staff and/or the commission the opportunity to advance an investigation. I think the mechanism, if the commission disagrees, is when the investigation is completed and staff is making a recommendation. At that point, the commission decides whether to close the matter or advance it or settle it.
But there's
as
still
the
a,
case may be.
there's still a kind of a loophole here for the commission to overrule an investigation that the staff either has launched or would want to launch.
Oh, we can't address that.
It has to be done through legislation. Commissioner Cardozo.
All the material you give us is very useful, but the reports are such that we can't really study them all because they're just too much. And I just wonder whether there's any way to asterisk what we should read those paragraphs a little bit more closely. For example, if the applicant was the head of SUNY, should we take a harder look at it? Just the commissioners, because to read all of those reports, none of us are going to do it. It's a
Oh, well,
practical.
we are, this meeting, we don't have that with respect to investigative matters. When we do have that.
Got it.
In executive session, we flag,
Oh, okay.
but that's part of the executive session.
So what is the time frame between when we get the notification of open investigation, or that there's been a complaint made, and when there's a determination to either close or proceed? So we get like a weekly report, right?
Yes.
And so, is there a time frame within which we get that report and action is taken by the staff?
In other words, an investigation, so
The-
we
the-
get
Or a
it.
closing.
Is the investigation, the letter gone out already? Is it about to go out? In other words, where is that land?
We've only, I want to be careful here because we're in public session.
Yeah.
We've only had one instance in which, and I added that to the protocol. Staff was planning to issue 15-day letters. And we did provide advance notice, but as I interpret the statute, it's a staff determination at that point. In terms of closings, those are reported before they take place at the commission meeting. So there is advance notice being given. I didn't receive anything in response asking us to refrain. We could add time to the protocol.
I know, but that we do have a proposal that's still being under review.
Right.
And I don't think this takes that into account. So I think it should take that into account.
So say more about that,
So
Commissioner.
we have a proposal still under review about whether.
Right, sure, I understand. Yeah,
Right.
just sort of broadly speaking, right?
Right. And so I don't think this takes that into account. And I
Doesn't
think
take,
that's
what's the that?
That proposal that we're talking about, whether there are certain categories or persons under investigation that should go to the commission.
I see, yeah.
So
Well,
I think that's part
right.
of that proposal that we've been talking
Right,
about.
so, I mean, the law, as I understand it,
Well,
that,
there's
Right,
a dispute about what it says.
so that, there's still, Kavita?
Hi, I just wanted to just jump in, and I wanted to make sure that I think the proposal that we may be talking, Commissioner Caraballo, you may be referring to, and correct me if I'm wrong, may be referring to outside activity requests by higher level people. These are the adjudicatory regs that were first brought to the commission in November of 2022 to solidify what our investigative procedures are. And as Executive Director Berland pointed out, our process is, and the procedure basically is, when the investigation staff, and Brian here can correct me if I'm wrong, when a tip comes in, investigation staff, reviews the tip, does a preliminary investigation. If there's any reach out that needs to happen, the commission is given notice of that reach out before it happens, both in the weekly charts as well as, and then it's compiled at the commission meeting book as well. And then commissions and then investigative staff does their investigation, and that investigation could take 1 week, it could take 2 weeks, it could be a more detailed investigation, it may take 4 weeks, it may take longer, we may be waiting for documents. When the investigation staff, the deputy director and the director feel that it is, at a point where a further decision needs to get made, does there appear to be a credible violation, and then it needs to get elevated, it gets presented to the commission for that, okay, if you will, that we want to present it to the commission, and then, I guess formally start the investigation. And so, when it gets to that point, the commissioners are made aware of that. the commissioners can decide, when staff presents, that, you know what, this, we disagree with staff, and the commissioners can vote to say, no, we don't think this is something to go forward on, and commissioners can vote to close it. Conversely, when we bring matters for commissioners to vote to close, commissioners can say can vote that, no, we want staff to further investigate this. We don't feel comfortable closing this yet. And that's all laid out in the adjudicatory regs. Does that help?
Does that help?
And I guess if there was a decision by the staff not to do an investigation,
We wouldn't
we
know.
could revisit
Or
it.
would we?
Yeah, we would
We
know.
wouldn't know. We wouldn't
Absolutely,
know.
because
We
they
could-
reported out to us.
We-
Yeah.
We would not know.
We would
No,
know.
we would
We
know.
would.
We would know,
And if
absolutely.
we, if we don't
That these
agree,
came in and we.
That these came in and
Yeah.
that they are
And they're
recommending
unsubstantiated.
that we not pursue them.
The only, we are giving notice in advance, but the exception is if we have instances, and they're not infrequent, where a complaint comes in that involves none of the statutes that this agency enforces, and the alleged subject is someone who is not within our jurisdiction.
That's the exception.
A complaint that a congressman has violated the federal securities laws.
Yeah, we're clear about that.
Those
I
matters
don't
are
think-
administratively
Right.
closed, but
Yeah. I don't think those are
anything where a
issues.
determination needs to be made, we're taking it to the commission to close it.
Is that good, Commissioner Carvalho?
That clarifies.
That clarifies it? May not
I
be
was
good,
wondering
but
if
it
you needed
clarifies.
other language in here, and so, and that was the reason that I was asking about it. And I do have other things on this proposal.
okay.
And it's.
Go ahead.
There's a lot here. I don't know if
Go
you want
ahead,
to go
go
over
ahead,
it like
go
this.
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Take my mask off so you can hear me a little bit. All right. So, in section 941, the definitions, not that this should go there, but the hearing officers, I had previously requested a list of the hearing officers. I don't have that. I don't know if it's on the website and I missed it, but I'd like to have a list, and I'd like to know how we select them and how often we review them and what the criteria is. And I think our website should say who our hearing officers are and some background about them. So I think that should be included on our website. And,
Let's just reflect that request on the minutes so that we have a record of it.
We had discussed previously, I just want to raise it again, I think Ava raised it, the 15-day letter being called a notice of allegations or something that is, more, tells
More
the
definitive.
person what, more definitive, thank you, more descriptive, thank you.
Let me just say in response to that, we followed the statute as the statute has been revised, and the language is just so that's understood with respect to the 15-day letter.
It's
Is there
required by
anything that-
statute for it to say 15 day,
Right,
to be
that's
called a
the question.
15-day letter?
Yes.
Is there any prohibition for us adding some
Absolutely right.
descriptive language to that? So we're sending you.
And I think that's still under review, that plain language changes. I don't know if they're still under review or where we are with that.
Commissioner, I don't want to speak for Commissioner Ayers, except in previous
here.
commission meetings,
She's here.
it was agreed that approving these proposed amended regulations would not by any means foreclose subsequent changes when the larger review is done for plain language conformity of all the
I
regulations.
kind of thought we were talking about
Commissioner
just
Ayers?
doing something once.
But I'll defer to Commissioner
Yes.
Ayers on.
Sure. Hi. So, my suggestion was that we not refer to anything by the phrase 15-day letter. Because I think it's incomprehensible for somebody who's not already an expert on our procedures. Sandy, the statute, we didn't talk about that last time. I mean, my view would be number one, even if the statute calls it a 15-day letter, we're perfectly free to say, this is a notice of allegations, and then in parentheses, explain that the statute calls it a 15-day letter. And we don't have to use that language. I think that's very commonly done. But also, I'm not sure. I'm looking in the statute. I don't see anywhere.
That's what it says. That's what it says. So.
Commissioner James?
It's not 15 days.
Commissioner James?
The section 941.3 notices, it says notice of allegations, parentheses, 15-day letter.
That's our regs.
Under that section, says
That's our regs, though.
15-day letter to say notice of allegations.
NDA right there.
It is defined there as.
It's defined, but it's not what we're using more regularly. I like to switch it up instead of using the 15-day letter to be using the notice of allegations. I just think it's clearer to people who are not.
I totally agree with you,
okay.
and I think Commissioner James has pointed out that it's actually in the regs.
I see that 941.3, right? I see that. All right, so it's not 15-day letter. You're right. Okay.
So we can call it a notice of allegations in parentheses 15-day letter.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Instead of
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Commissioner Ayers, and then we'll get back to Commissioner.
But just really quick, I thought Kavita was trying to say something before, and I wanted to make sure she had a chance.
Oh, no, I was just pointing out what Commissioner James said as well, that it said the notice of allegation. Same thing.
Okay, great, thanks. So let me just then say, I said earlier, and I still feel I'm happy to approve this as is, on the understanding that we still have in front of us the comprehensive review of the regulations, which, in my opinion, should encompass things like plain language and accessibility. And I missed the first part of the meeting, so if this was discussed already, that's totally fine. But my understanding from the previous meeting was we were going to have a presentation on how that comprehensive review is going to work at this meeting. That was discussed last time. So,
well, yeah.
You did that great.
Well, it was not discussed. It was not discussed earlier.
Okay.
But again, let's put it on. Let's have it reflected on the minutes that we need a discussion about the process for doing this comprehensive review of all our documents, regulations, et cetera, with the plain language framework in mind.
Yes, and the original plan was to present it. We did have some commissioners who were not going to be available. And so the plan is to have it at that presentation at the July meeting. Okay. So I took it off the agenda and we'll move it back on for next time.
That's fine. I guess I would request that that be circulated sometime in advance, because my sense at the last meeting was that there may be different perspectives on what that should look like, and I think it'd be helpful to have some time in advance of the meeting for folks to have input on that, if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay. Of course. All right. Thank you. Commissioner Carvalho.
Okay, so 941.4, time and place of hearing and service of filings. Letter C. I'm just wondering. So it says 9. It's page 941.4, letter C. I'm just curious to know, it says, okay, so by the resource shall be served upon the hearing officer. Where are our hearings normally held? Is there a normal place, or is it at the site of the hearing officer?
My understanding is there's no normal site. The parties and the hearing officer will select the location.
And 941.5 representation. I kind of really don't understand what A says. Is it that you can have a non-attorney represent you, or you can't? Right. And if it's not an attorney, then who is allowed? Because I think this is a little vague and it needs a little clarification, unless I just.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yeah. Do you get my question?
No, I understand that, and the point has been to allow the respondent to select an attorney or non-attorney subject to consent or not of the other side of the commission and/or the determination of the hearing officer. And so we've left it open.
Shall be required to establish his or her authority to act in that capacity, meaning that they have been authorized by the
Yes.
complainant? All right.
Yeah.
I just think it's a little unclear, and so I would ask for a little tightening up of it.
And do they have to show up?
If you have suggested language.
Okay.
I wasn't sure whether or not it implied that the
The
person.
representative has to show up or not?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Could they be represented by an attorney and not show up?
I believe that could be the case.
Okay, that just wasn't clear. It was a question that I raised when I was reading it. It wasn't clear to me. So you just might want to look at that
You're saying
language.
like any civil proceeding, okay.
Yeah, like,
All right.
as in any civil proceeding, the respondent.
I will think of some language.
The respondent has the right to appear, but can waive that
okay.
right.
I didn't
Yeah,
see that.
and what stage it's at, just like a.
Right, so I'm just trying to, yeah, I'm not clear on that. So if I have an attorney, I cannot appear, meaning if I'm a person who's the subject of a complaint, and if I don't have an attorney and I have a brother who's smart and he wants to appear, I cannot appear, and that's a little unclear.
That would be, it would be an application, the way I would anticipate to the hearing officer, subject to the consent or objection of the commission in that instance, as in court. I don't know that we could provide for, if you have suggested language.
Okay, I will. I know we're trying to do this today, but
Add
I
it
just-
now.
I do have, huh?
No,
Okay,
you
I
have
don't have it right now, the language, I'll think of it. And then the selection of the hearing officer. Is there a list and you pick the next person on the list? Is there a random, is there, or you pick out of, how do you pick a hearing officer?
There is a
And I
list.
just want to say, I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm not going to say that. Go ahead, I'll talk
Sorry.
about that later at executive, go ahead.
There is a list, we will provide it to you. And an outside entity performs the selection.
An outside entity?
Yes. So it's not, the selection is not made by commission staff or the commission, but the selection from the list of hearing officers is made by a third party.
The third party that we hired? Just
Yeah,
to do that?
just as we use accounting firms to do the random audit selections, the random review selections.
Okay. All right, so that was my next question, what did that mean? Okay, sorry. I'm wondering about the use of depositions. Is that pursuant to the civil law? Like that you have to give them the depositions and get it, like is there a procedure the way there is in the CPLR? And I'm at number 6, proposed further amended. Oh, wait, that's not it. Section 924, 1.7, powers and duties, number 3. So it says that you can use depositions. I'm just curious to know whether if there is a procedure for that, like there is in the CPLR, or how is that? How do we administer that?
The hearing officer would determine whether there was good cause.
It's in the provision.
It's in the provision?
It's in the provision, and it's consistent with Article 3 of the State Administrative Procedure Act, which allows the presiding officer at an administrative hearing to make determinations
At their discretion,
about discovery and so on, as well as to conduct the hearing.
That's my question. Thank you.
Probably not as clear as the CPLR, right?
Yeah, no, and I understand that the rules are different, and I did see that part of this provision, that it's a little softer. Sorry, guys.
It's all right. No, that's why we're here.
The 941.16, the hearings are taped, like are they are at most, are the hearings taped, or is that how it works? And you get a transcript of it?
There is a stenographer.
There's an actual stenographer?
An actual stenographer. Okay.
I'm a little concerned about, let me find the heading. 941.16, privacy and confidentiality.
Yes.
And I'm going to the second to third page after that heading. I'm a little concerned about D, which is, in accordance with this section, the commission has also delegated to staff the authority to consider the criteria in subdivision C of this section, and upon a determination that disclosures in the public interest, staff shall, and then there's a list there. I just think I'm a little, I don't think that's clear enough for me, how that is done, like how the decision is made, even after looking at those 4 points.
Yeah, and this was something that was developed toward the end of JCOPE as a means of affording both the commission, and that's under sub C, and the foregoing provisions, latitude in making certain information available where there was a lack of clarity in the views of that commission.
I would
about investigative related information and how it's protected. And so the purpose of sub D was to allow the executive director and other staff, upon a determination that something's already in the public, based on the criteria that are listed in C, which are quite extensive, that it's in the public interest, not inconsistent with the statute, to confirm the very narrow range of factual things about matter as defined in 1 through 4. Whether, a matter had been publicized, say, by a complainant, so knowledge is out there that a complaint had been filed. In some instances, if it's in the public interest, won't compromise the investigation, won't harm potential source of information and informant. Staff could confirm that it has been asked by law enforcement not to proceed in the matter, or to hold it in abeyance. That would also, require a determination of whether exposing the request from law enforcement, for example, would compromise the criminal investigation that law enforcement was conducting. So it's a multifaceted.
I would like to propose that sort of go before the commissioners, and that's my concern, because it is an important aspect of our, the confidentiality aspect is important, and I think we've all seen where things are, like at the Judicial Commission, and they're not supposed to be made public, and then somehow they get out there either by different personnel. So that's my proposal with
let me just, the response to it, the reason for this narrow range was that these are limited disclosures, if you will, really confirmations of typically publicly already known things in instances where it would be in the commission's interest overall not to be deemed to be stonewalling somehow and have to wait until the next commission meeting. Commission, typically is meeting more or less monthly to confirm to a reporter about a publicly known matter that the matter's been closed or it's pending or just these very limited things. It was intended to expedite in a very limited way the communication of information to.
I have just seen this be really harmful to a subject of what should be a confidential complaint. So, and I've seen people's reputations get shredded because somebody makes a statement to the press, and then the press asks a question, and then there's a disclosure that shouldn't have been made. I am a lot concerned about.
Yes, and that's why victim is also included in the exclusions from the information that staff could be making available.
What are you proposing?
Yeah, but, so but if the subject of the investigation is publicly known, well, if the subject of the alleged investigation is publicly known, I think what Commissioner Carvalho is saying is if the commission or staff confirms that investigation is underway, that can be damaging to the subject's reputation. And that we as a commission, I think this is what she's saying, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but that we as a commission have no way of preempting staff from making that kind of public disclosure.
Staff has no objection to removing this, no objection whatsoever to removing this subdivision, if that would be the, well, I'm speaking not for communication staff, which will have to deal with the press, but it would be, communication staff would have to say, sorry, we can neither confirm nor deny.
Time at the commission's arguably hasn't been that long. This has only been, this whole set of criteria, right, we have to go through on the 14 points, has only come into even consideration once. In all other inquiries, we have said we cannot confirm or deny. And on this one, it's public knowledge now, right? And it was
absolutely public knowledge at both ends.
Sides. So that was why all the criteria went through. And I did not make this call by any means. I believe that Sandy talked to the chair about it before that decision was made. So, or maybe not, maybe Sandy.
Well,
it was definitely consideration of.
I don't know what you're talking about. So we can't talk about it publicly, but let's go into executive session and we can pick it up. So I'm not sure what we're referring to.
But from the perspective,
I just don't know which subject they're referring to.
Got it. Okay.
That's all. Yeah.
So, but I will say, 99% of the time, we have given the answer. We cannot confirm or deny an investigation, whether guidance has been sought or given. We have standard language now that says while we are committed to transparency, there are provisions in law that protect people in these instances, and we cite those sections and say, therefore, we cannot provide this information. And we usually will put in exactly what the language says. So we are very cognizant of this, of confidentiality, and this is not a determination that is made like, if I get a phone call, I'm like, oh yeah, no.
Emily.
Every press inquiry we get.
We lost the connection. They're back, keep going, they're back.
Every press inquiry we get, I discuss with Sandy. Every single one. So just have that confidence that there's never going to be a situation where I just pick up the phone and make a decision willy-nilly about whether confidentiality applies. I would never. It's very clear to me. Sandy, my first day was like, let me point you to regulations 94.16, 941.16. Please read these and talk to me when we're done. So it's taken very, very seriously.
I like the idea of, I would be in favor of striking that section myself.
Well, we can strike it, and if the commission wants to take it up through whatever committee and restore it.
Well, and I will say, I believe, this predates me, but the reason this was in here was because your predecessor came under incredible fire because they were not confirming a well-known investigation. So that's just, again, I don't have strong feelings one way or other. If it's a statute or reg, I can say that's why, but that I believe is why.
Did you have something you wanted to say about it?
No, I was just saying that New York City was none. I believe they're on now.
Oh, they're on. Okay.
I can see.
I would just say.
But.
Yeah, Commissioner Whittingham, were you done, Commissioner Carvalho?
No, I was going to just make a point of this. I hear what Emily's saying about, the former commission being attacked for not confirming or denying, and that's fine. So the compromise is, if we don't take it out, I don't think that the urgency is there to confirm or deny. So I think the executive director earlier said, we do that, we don't want to wait for a meeting. But if it's already out there publicly, right, then what is the delay of a week or 2 weeks going to do to confirm or deny? So I think either that could be a compromise, either it's taken out, if it's not taken out and it's there, and to Commissioner Carvalho wanting for it to first come, I think that's okay.
I mean, I will say, but I don't want to get ahead of Emily. My experience, reporters rarely call and say, I'm writing a story that I'm publishing 3 weeks from now. Can you tell me whether or not the such and such?
Agreed.
In publicly known investigation, whether you're still pursuing it or something like that. It's usually, my deadline is 4 o'clock.
That she does, which says.
Let's listen, can I just pursue this nuance? So Sandy's point was just now to confirm an investigation that is already public. That's a very different thing than confirming or denying an investigation has been alleged. And so I think we have at least two different sort of cases at work, potentialities at work here around this reg. One, what can you do when something is already known and someone is looking for a reaffirmation? And two, what do you do when something's alleged?
I don't think they should get the reaffirmation from us unless.
They should not.
I don't think they should. And I think that, what?
I'm just asking.
Okay.
Right.
And I think that what you had suggested earlier is to give like a reason that we're not giving a comment. I think that covers it. And if after we meet and have a discussion, we decide we want to say something, then we could say something at that point. But I think then if it's an article, a story coming out, I think it suffices with the responses that you propose. I think those are good responses. We're not commenting because it's this, that, or the other. I don't think it's up to us to make things public just because someone out there is making it public. That's my feeling. And again, I do have reason for saying this.
So I understand the concerns, but I'm fine with the way it reads right now. To try to, when a reporter calls and to try to get this to every commissioner, that's what you do. That's what, you understand this provision. I'm confident that you'll go through the criteria and respond accordingly. That's my view.
So the issue before us as to whether or not we leave this subsection D in under section 6, or we take it out. Is that right? Is that
yes.
the question?
Well,
you're the one who's you're the one who's raising it. So if you say that's the question, that's the question. So do you want to take it out, or you want to leave it? So you want to make a motion?
I would. Well, you want me to make separate motion? Okay, I make motion to amend section 941.16 privacy confidentiality to delete subsection D in its entirety.
What about C? It kind of goes there.
C is right there with that, right?
I thought C was the criteria the commission members.
So what?
We make.
Yeah, one has to do with the commission, and the other has to do with the staff.
Oh,
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, C would stay in there.
So
We
you
just wouldn't delegate it.
D has to
Right.
do with staff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the
my
motion. Is there a second
Second.
to remove subsection D? Is there any more debate or discussion? All right, all those in favor of removing this section, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Do I see, I can't see New York.
My hand is not
Your
raised.
hand raised in New, it's not, and Commissioner Ayers,
I'm voting against.
no, okay. Well, we'll do it. So let's, all those opposed to removing it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Commissioner James, 5. So it fails 5-0. 4?
5-3.
5-3.
Yeah, 3.
Who are we
Carmelo,
missing?
Whittingham, and.
Oh, yeah, we're missing Groenewegen and Austin. Okay. All righty.
So what are we doing?
It stays.
Staying?
It stays here.
Could I, Mr. Chair, could I just add one comment?
Sure.
Um,
Yes.
I just want to say that my sense is that part of the comprehensive review that we need to undertake of the regulations has to do with delegation to staff and the functions that should be delegated to staff. And I voted against Mr. Caraballo's motion, but I'm very open to re-examining that as we think more globally about the appropriate extent of delegation generally.
Understood. Thank you. And I would agree. I think this delegation question remains a conundrum to some degree for the commission, and we need to get more clarity on it. But I think we should do it comprehensively and not piecemeal. I would agree with that. Commissioner Whitney.
That was just a question on the delegation. I think just about every meeting we've had that issue raised. When are we going to do something about it? Can we have a deadline?
We have a preliminary resolution coming in September. We set September 27th as the deadline to get a response from the committee, the special committee that's been set up to address this.
There's a deadline of September 27th?
Yes, we talked about it, yeah.
For delegation?
For that committee to come up with a set of recommendations, yeah.
I'm not sure I was aware on that committee.
Yeah, I don't.
We talked, but we all talked about it.
I'm on that committee, so.
But we talked about the end of September, you know.
I actually thought it was coming up on this meeting, that issue.
Oh, you're talking about what we already passed earlier today?
No, we talked about the delegation committee coming up with a report by the end of September.
Oh, I wasn't at their last meeting. So
we said we would set that time to keep this thing from continuing to be just the issue you raised.
I was not aware of that.
I was not aware of that. Is that in the minutes?
It could be in the minutes of the committee meeting. Sure, Commissioner Ayers?
So I think maybe this illustrates it. I think there's been some confusion about whether that special committee is a special committee on guidance or a special committee on delegation. And so, you know, the minutes tend to refer to it both ways, sort of alternating. And my understanding of the resolution that you're referring to was that the committee was going to come back with recommendations that relate to the process for informal guidance, which is very different from recommendations about delegation issues globally across the commission's work. And so at the last meeting of that committee, I had requested that we get a written charge from the full commission that clarifies the scope of that committee's mission, because I continue to think that that's very important, because I think that, you know, as we discussed last time we talked about committees, the full commission should be aware of the assignment for each committee and fully on board, so that any member of the commission who wants to participate can do so. So I think it's, in light of this conversation here, it's particularly important that we get a written charge out that makes clear whether that committee is dealing with delegation, or whether it's globally, or whether it's limited to the context of guidance.
I take your and Commissioner Whittingham's point. Go ahead.
Right, no, because I think 1, 2, 3, 4 of us who are supposedly on that committee did not know that September 27th was a deadline.
I agree, no.
So we're like, when are we going to deal with this, which is now.
Well, let's put it under new business, and let's deal with the issue that we have now before us, and that is this proposed rule change. And then we can do new business on this issue of what the responsibility of this special committee is.
Oh, the special.
So right now we have before us,
You have the motion.
we have a motion on,
No, I didn't finish.
you didn't finish, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So 941.17, this was an easy one, I hope.
I hope so.
94, on the second, third, if I had this
No, go
well in
ahead, go
advance, I
ahead,
would have
go
marked it
ahead.
up and sent it out, but I
ahead.
didn't have enough advance
fine.
of
Keep going.
it, so on letter D, 1, subsection 1, I would propose that we change the word chairman to chair, just like it is in number 2.
Sure. Okay.
So I hope that's an easy one.
That is
That's an easy one, yeah.
Thank you, good.
Have one.
Take that as a typo, yeah.
And that's it.
Praise the
Finished.
All
Lord.
right, all right, so now, we have a
I
motion,
was starving, I'm sorry, guys.
do we have a motion on the floor
So
to
moved.
approve the adoption of this proposed further?
Chair Davy,
Yeah, Commissioner James.
on page 3, I think there was a elected to the Joint Commission on Public Ethics to Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government under Chapter 20.
Page 3.
Both sides.
Commissioner James, could you repeat that, please?
On the third page, in the middle of the page, I think it says proposed regulatory amendment. In the middle of the page, chapter 20, it says Joint Commission on Public Ethics. I think it should be the Commission.
Got it, yeah,
Oh.
right here, it just needs to be changed.
How'd I miss it?
Okay, that's an oversight.
We don't know.
Got it. All right,
Shame.
so, motion's on the floor to adopt the proposed further conforming amendments to the adjudicatory proceedings and appeals process regulations 19 NYCRR, part 941. With the correction, non-substantive corrections that we've noted. That's the motion, does someone make it? Commissioner Carney, is there a second? Commissioner Edwards, is there any more discussion?
No.
Don't tempt me, no.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Keith, where's your
All
dog?
those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the amendment is adopted. So under new business, as succinctly, go ahead.
I have old business. but I don't know
Okay,
which
let's
one.
what do we do first? Let's do new business, then we'll do old business. Commissioner Whittingham or Commissioner Ayers, do you want to make a recommendation about how we proceed with this issue of the special committee and its charge as it relates to either delegation or guidance or both?
Yeah.
Commissioner Ayers?
Okay, I'll start off just saying, I don't have strong feelings about it. I have strong feelings that we need clarity and that it should be in writing, but I don't have strong feelings about what we choose. That said, to me, it makes more intuitive sense that the issue of delegation be addressed as part of our comprehensive review of the regulations, because the way I understand that process, the commissioners are going to need to initially develop a deeper understanding than we currently have of the whole regulatory scheme. Presumably that'll be broken out by committees, but delegation is going to be a global issue that cuts across all of those things. My instinct would be that rather than tasking a committee to make global recommendations on delegation now, we should hear the presentation that I gather is planned for July about how we're supposed to address the comprehensive review and address the global question of delegation as part of that process. But as I say, I don't have strong feelings about it. My only strong feeling is that we should all be clear on what the committee is doing and that putting it in writing is the best way to do that.
Great. So if we do this global approach on delegation, then we are taking the issue of delegation essentially out of a comprehensive review out of the purview, or it won't be a part of the purview of the special committee, and the special committee will be focused solely on guidance.
Well, that's all we've done so far, so it doesn't feel like taking much away from us.
Okay, well, that's probably not the appropriate language, but we're just making sure that that special committee focuses on guidance.
I
still think since it's an issue that we hear at every meeting, we may not be able to wait until this comprehensive review of all the regulations, some of which were adopted, and say we're going to do a comprehensive review. It comes up at every single meeting, and so I believe it is necessary for us to address it on its own, like what is delegated and what is not. And that is separate and apart from the overall review of the legislature and all the rules, because that's more comprehensive.
Right. So here's part of the concern is timing, right? So we've got some big chunks on our schedule. We're looking at a special day in September just to deal with our legislative agenda. And then we have a September meeting. And then we have to refine that legislative agenda by December at the latest, so that it can be considered. The delegation issue seems to me to be its own big, massive phenomenon that we need to engage as well. So the question is when. Do we want to set up a number of working days where we just do that? My concern is that we're going to overburden ourselves and our own processes with these big things. So I would recommend, and if we can continue as we have been with delegation through the end of the year, raising questions when they come up, get these other big items off the schedule by the end of the year, and then make delegation and make delegation and the comprehensive review priorities for the beginning of the next year. That way we've got some plan about how we're going to proceed. But we're having a hard time now doing what is before us. I don't think adding two other big pieces this year in the time we have remaining is actually practical. So I would ask that we have them starting 2024. Those two things will be our priorities, reflected on the minutes that we're talking about delegation in this comprehensive review.
Well, I can't argue with you, but go back to my notes. We decided in early March that we would form a special committee to deal with this. We did some research, we got some input, and now nothing has happened.
But they're saying, but they're saying that the special committee was focused on guidance, not delegation.
Well, we called it delegation in March memos. We sent memos to some groups, other groups that gave us input on this issue. The Hogan-Lovells report raised this issue. I remember discussing on the train with Len and I think Ed early on this issue. Nothing has happened on it, which is the problem. So given the practicalities of where we are, I don't know if we have any choice but to postpone this till January. I think we are leaving ourselves open to substantial criticism that we've taken over practically a year to deal with the issue that in effect caused the creation of COLIG to begin with.
I couldn't agree more. It's a year, our 1 year anniversary will be in next week. Next Saturday is July 8th. And for one of the major issues, I think this is a priority and we should treat it as such, and deferring it is not ideal.
I agree it's not ideal, but I think if we try to do anything else right now, we'll be doing a disservice to this
I think
This
issue.
was the
Yeah.
core, that's the only issue, is that this was one of the core things. And we're saying we're gonna go around the core. That's the crux of the matter,
Yeah,
is that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't think we're going around it. I think we're being careful about how we deal with it. And if you want to rush it, then we stand to make some big mistakes.
I don't know if we're rushing it, because it's been a while, we've gone through it. I think there was a proposal that was drafted. I thought it was going to be presented at this meeting, that was my understanding.
Yeah, but that proposal had to do with
It's just one
guidance.
issue, I understand.
Yeah, it
Just
didn't
one
have to
issue.
do with delegation comprehensively. It just had to do with guidance.
With guidance.
Yes.
Well, guidance and delegation.
Right.
And
we
it
should
was
still
one-
get that, because
Right.
we should still get, I think you drafted a resolution, and we should still get that resolution in September, and we should consider it from the special committee.
In
But
July, maybe.
Or
Next
in
month,
July.
okay.
July's fine. But in terms of this bigger issue of delegation, it's huge. And I don't even know how we would take step one to begin to really deal with it the way we need to deal with it. September, October, November, and December. I just don't see it.
Commissioner Cortez said, we already got input from other agencies throughout the country. Sorry, my voice is moving.
Yeah, I understand, and I understand we're gonna look bad, but I'd rather look bad and get it right than to try to rush and do it wrong. However, if there is if it's a sense of the commission that we should go ahead and figure out a way to deal with it now, that would be the sense of the commission.
Given the inability of the guidance committee to come to grips with the issue at all, other than the initial talking about it, I'm afraid you're right. But I think
We could move to take it, starting in January, take it out of the, we could sunset the guidance committee on the guidance issue. And then we could choose to decide a different approach beginning at the new year to deal with the delegation issue, which will take us months to resolve.
Okay.
I'm afraid you're right.
Okay. So
You're usually right, even when I'm not afraid.
I should have you at home. But I don't want this to drift. So let's get a plan, right? So is the plan, and then can we have a motion that we're going to sunset the guidance committee after it issues its report on guidance in July? And then between July and January, we'll come up with a proposal for dealing with the delegation issue.
And what will the guidance committee be dealing with in July?
There is a resolution, at least that I saw, that the guidance committee wants to present on, because you remember we had the discussion about whether or not the commission needs to sign off on or vote on certain opinions, informal and otherwise. And there's a resolution that has been introduced to that committee, and that the guidance committee would present that resolution to the full commission for consideration.
But that's just
Totally.
theoretically,
Totally.
the delegation committee could come up with a different conclusion that would, in effect, overrule what we're going to do in July.
Theoretically, but I don't think that's about to happen, because we're going to just focus on guidance, and and then we can sunset the subcommittee, special committee.
Okay.
Can I just, Mr. Chair, if I could?
Sure.
But just a thought that I'm very thoroughly persuaded by my colleagues' concerns about moving efficiently on delegation. And I'm not sure if this simplifies things, but it does seem to me that, the committee structure allows us some ability to multitask as a body. particularly in the sense that, understanding the delegation issue, for example, is going to require some work, both on the part of the commissioners and on the part of the staff. For example, before we started talking about the guidance issue, I didn't realize how complicated it was going to get, right? Thinking about these different ways that informal guidance could come in, different points at which the commission could get involved, different ways the commission could get involved. There's a lot of understanding that we needed before we could start making recommendations on that. And so this may be consistent with your suggestion, Mr. Chair, that even though there is this guidance committee that's going to work on our legislative agenda, I wonder if it would be possible for those of us who are particularly interested in delegation to begin this summer working with staff to identify the issues that are going to be presented for decision, learning about what those issues are, and in other words, doing some of the groundwork laying that's going to make an effective discussion possible. Recognizing that may mean that we're less involved in things like the legislative agenda. But speaking personally, I'm okay with that. I think that, for personally, I'd be happy to prioritize working on delegation instead of working on legislative issues and trust my colleagues on the legislative agenda. And so, I heard Commissioner Whittingham speak very persuasively about the need to act promptly with that. So maybe she'd be interested in joining me in working on laying the groundwork for a successful conversation. It's just a thought.
I would agree with that. I think you can do it over email and not have to, at least to get started, and not have to form a committee. I think we can have lots of initial discussions about what the major issues are. Keep that going until we get some of these other big issues off our plate. And if it's the end of the year, it's the end of the year. If it's before the end of the year, then we can pick it up sooner. But yeah, why not?
Well, we've already done some research, and the two are not mutually exclusive.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I hear what you're saying. All right. So Commissioner Ayers, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Whittingham.
So what I hear so far, and yes, Commissioner Ayers, I would join on that, is that there are a couple of commissioners who may be interested and willing to do it now. So do we reform the delegation committee, make it smaller, those people who are interested and ready to begin the work now, ready to put the time into the work now, separate and apart from the legislature and the comprehensive review? Do we have a new delegation committee with those individuals, those commissioners who are saying today, we are committed to start working today. We see this as a priority and we want to move forward now. And then, we would have gotten to a lot of things by January, because the delegation committee, it's going to be, here are the things that we have staff doing, or that's delegated or used to be delegated to staff, examine it, what do we want to do now? And if a smaller group of us is saying we want to do it now and we're willing to put the time in, then if it's therefore necessary to reform or change the makeup of the delegation committee, is that something that we can do?
So, sure, we can do anything you want. Anything you can do, we can get the votes for. But so two thoughts. One would be that if we're going to call this committee the delegation committee as opposed to guidance committee, we call it the delegation, special committee on delegation. And we can have a subcommittee on, guidance. And then just get that report, get it out, and then you go full force on delegation. So we could do it that way if you want to do it, and just proceed. I still think we've got some. I still think that the burden of what we're pursuing doesn't go away, it only gets greater with this, but if that's the sense of the group, then let's do it and let's move forward. So there would be so Commissioner Ayers said we need clarity, and I agree. And I think you all have said the same thing. So we need a motion that would be that that we're going to have this committee that we've gone back and forth with on guidance and delegation, that it will be from this point forward known as the Commission on Delegation, Special Committee on Delegation, Special Committee on Delegation. And that it will have as its charge both the issue of delegation, issues of delegation, and the issue of guidance. And we expect a report very soon on guidance, because we have a resolution that that committee is considering. And that we will expect a report, you say when, by the end of the year, early next year, on delegation.
That's going to change the membership.
I don't see a need to change the membership unless people want to.
I'm on it, okay, I'm on it. I think we're
Because
all,
all
I
of
think,
you are
yeah,
on it already.
We're on it.
Yeah, they're already on it. Is all right?
yes.
Okay. So, motion to that effect, that we will change the name, we will recognize the official name of this special committee. It's a Special Committee on Delegation. It's got two responsibilities, delegation and guidance, and we expect a report on guidance at the July meeting. Commissioner Whittingham, Commissioner Carballo, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner James?
Aye.
Okay, all those, okay, any opposed? All right. Old business.
I just want to ask and point out that the minutes reflect, minutes of the last meeting said, excuse me, on page 8, it says that the draft of the semi-annual report would be distributed at this meeting. And I just wonder, since the Communications Committee, I think, was then going to be charged with the need to comment on it, or I was at least, and I know how busy everyone has been, and Emily has been in particular, where things stand on that.
I can give an update. So it will go to committee very soon. And I think our goal now is to get it to the full commission in advance of the July meeting, but that is dependent upon what changes the committees have. So if the committee's changes are, let's change this a little bit over here, a little bit over there, July, we're great.
So we'll have it in time for the July committee meeting,
Yes.
July 10th?
Yes. But if the changes out of committee are substantive and take more time, then it might get bumped to the subsequent commission meeting. But we are actively working on it. It is really close to being able to be shared, and we've made a lot of progress.
Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, may I ask, when we agree to get something out at a specific time regarding committee, that the committee needs to be informed that it's not going to be on the agenda as planned? We should know as a committee what the status is. And if we're not able to achieve the goal that we set for ourselves, that we would present at the meeting, then we should know that. We should not know that at this meeting. We should know in advance of this meeting.
You will have it in time.
No, it was due this meeting, right?
That's what the minutes
It was due
say.
this meeting.
I don't recall that being.
It's in the minutes.
It's in the minutes.
It's in the minutes.
I know there was discussion subsequent to that meeting with the executive director and the chair about timing, and I believe Commissioner Cardozo, you were part of that as well, about timing and when we were going to do that. So if that didn't get communicated to the whole committee, I apologize.
Okay. Then my other point is on page 10 of the minutes, there was a discussion, I don't know exactly why, we were explained at the June meeting about a comprehensive review of advisory opinions.
Yes,
That was that?
and the plan was to have it, and I had it on the agenda, however, a couple of commissioners were not available.
I see, okay.
So I made a command decision to push it to the July meeting, when hopefully everybody will be present.
Thank you.
And I think one of the things that we'll try to do is a lot of these informal conversations we'll try to put in writing so that people are aware of them. I think that's the best thing to do. Okay. Motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law 105 and Executive Law 94, subsection 11, to address matters concerning employment of personnel and pending litigation and investigative and enforcement matters that is confidential pursuant to Section 94 of the Executive Law. So moved by Commissioner Carvalho. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Edwards. No discussion. All those in favor of moving to executive session say aye. All those opposed, no. Ayes have it. We are now in executive session. Thank you.
Can you just let us know when we're clear, please?
We are clear, thank you.
All right, thank you, and we're reconvening the public session of this June 27th, 2023 meeting of the New York State Commission on Ethics and Lobbying in Government. We will have a report out now from executive session, and I'll turn to the Executive Director, Sanford Berlin.
Thank you. In executive session, the commission discussed matters related to litigation or legal advice. The commission approved informal guidance pursuant to Executive Law Section 94(7) and Part 932. Discussed several requests for guidance pursuant to Part 1, and discussed other guidance matters. In addition, the commission authorized steps in several investigative matters, closed 6 matters, and discussed several other investigative matters.
Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I neglected to mention, I meant to, that our Director of Lobbying, Carol Quinn, on June 15th participated in a panel discussion at the 9th Annual Nonprofit OpCon, and her panel was entitled Demystifying Compliance for Nonprofits, and I'm sure all the mystique is now gone.
And I'm sure it was greatly appreciated. So thank you, Carol. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to staff. Thanks to commissioners. Thanks to the public. A motion to adjourn this public session of this commission meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you. And just 1 minute until we are no longer.
Okay, yep.
All right. Thank you.
You are clear, thank you.
That's okay. Yeah.